Okay, good morning, everybody. It is 9 a.m. on Wednesday, March the 5th, 2025. We are here for our NIAA Realignment Committee meeting. And as the chair of this committee, I will call this meeting to order. Ms. Wonder, if you wouldn't mind, please calling roll for us.
Sure. Brooke Formaster. Joshua Katz. Miles Baldwin.
Here.
David Vick. Sean Fitzsimons.
Here.
Ken Parker.
Here.
Mike Brooks.
Here.
Sarah Scott. Mike Kofer. Xavier Indium.
Here.
Bob Levitt.
Here.
Bart Davis.
Here.
Timothy Jackson. Paul Anderson.
Here.
Myself, Tia Wonder. Phil Tao.
Here.
Dallas Larson.
Present.
Jason Odegaard. Rob Kittrell. Wade
Here.
Pearson.
Here.
Paul Sullivan. Tammy Habig. Tony Polzin.
Here.
Domingo Rivera.
Here.
Isabel Sanchez.
Present.
Art Anderson.
Here.
Color, like,
Darvel Bell.
Here.
Freeman Holbrook.
and then, Harry Reid.
Markram.
Ms. Wonder, Ms. Formaster, and Mr. Sullivan both came in as you were calling.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Okay, let's move on to item number 3 on our agenda today, which is the approval of today's agenda. It can be seen starting on page 6 of your packet. Mr. Odegaard, by the way, Ms. Wonder, also is on his way in.
Okay.
We
and
do
Mr.
ask-
Vick is here also.
We do ask anybody who would make a motion, if you choose to approve today's agenda, if you could please make that motion for a flexible agenda, we would appreciate that.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I motion that we approve today's agenda and make it a flexible agenda.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzin, 485A South. I'll second that.
We have a motion from Mr. Larson, a second from Mr. Polzian, who just beat out Mr. Fitzsimons, to approve today's agenda as a flexible agenda. Any questions, any further discussion? All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please unmute. Okay, we have an agenda approved for today. Item number 4 on our agenda for today is committee chair announcements. Just a couple of things here. One, if you noticed your alignments in the packet, there have been a couple of changes. Worcester and Coral Vegas both had sent in appeals back in the fall that we heard that applied to the winter sports. For Worcester to be 3A in those winter sports, and for Coral Las Vegas also to go to 3A in those sports. That has been adjusted accordingly. My apologies for missing that the first time around. When we get into the appeals, which will be coming up here in just a minute or two, the first appeal on the list is a volleyball appeal. And yes, we're already past volleyball. The reason we are hearing it today is we flat out missed it when we were back in the fall appeals. Palo Verde appealed for both football and girls volleyball, and in the matrix that was football, we just lost it. So we'll hear that appeal first today. I really don't think it's going to cause any controversy. I did not want to have Palo Verde miss out on that because they did follow all the protocols. They had the appeal in on time. It didn't come 2 months late. They deserve to have that heard. Other than that, we have just a small handful of appeals for today. I don't think that part's going to take very long. We do have the tournament formats for fall and for winter to discuss. That I think will take a lot longer. Okay, let's move on to agenda item number 5, and that is public comment. And this time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person complete a public comment card and submit it to an NIAA staff member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, or willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. We have several public comments today that are geared towards one of the agenda items or multiple agenda items. We will hear those at the opening of those agenda items. Ms. Wonder, Mr. Jackson in our NIA office, or anybody else in the locations around the state, do we have anybody who wishes to make live public comment on an item not listed on the agenda at this time?
We have
No,
no
we
one
do
in
not.
the office.
Thank you. Anybody else? Okay, and Ms. Wonder, am I correct in saying that the public comments that you have that were sent in or the ones that we have waiting in the waiting room, specifically Mr. Anderson, those are all geared towards the tournament formats? Is that correct?
Correct.
Okay, thank you. Okay, so we will close public comment then at this time. Again, we will hear those geared towards specific agenda items at the opening of those agenda items. So let's move on to agenda item number 6, which is the hearing of appeals from schools wishing to change their classification in one or more sports for our alignment cycle. These are for possible action, as you see on pages 11 through 17, I believe it is, of your packet. We have the alignments as they sit right now. On page 18 of your packet, and I don't mean to make everybody dizzy by scrolling through these very quickly, but on page 18 of your packet, this was the Palo Verde appeal that came to us back in December. Palo Verde wishes to appeal its girls volleyball program placement and wanting to go to the 5A instead of the 4A. And if we look back at page number 11 in our packet, we can see that we have 9 teams currently in the 5A girls volleyball. Palo Verde was actually the next team up. Where we drew the line, Palo Verde was the team below the line. They were technically number 9. Liberty appealed up from spot number 11 and was granted a spot in the 5A. Palo Verde wishes to do the same thing. In talking to a couple of the other schools, and Mr. Anthium, if you would also kind of join in on this discussion, because I know you've had some discussions regarding volleyball scheduling on this also. We've had some coaches in favor of a 10th team simply because it would allow for a break for 2 5-team leagues within that 5A South. Mr. Anthium, I don't know if you wish to comment on that at this time.
Yeah, so Bart, thank you for having me. I believe in speaking with the 5A coaches, they are in support of having Palo Verde come up. They, like you said, would like to have 2 5-team leagues, and they would also like this to like you said, the Liberty went above them, so they feel like they should be moved up as well. So definitely in support of this on my end.
Yeah, and while I don't really come out too often on these appeals and say one or the other, to me, this is a very easy one. If Palo Verde wishes to go up, considering they were the team right below where that line was drawn, I don't see any reason to not have them go up. We can then, Mr. Anthium and I can refigure and reconfigure those 4A leagues. But that's pretty much where we stand in this. I did not want to force Palo Verde into coming to make an appeal that theoretically they've already made. So at this point, we would, sorry, Mr. Polzian, you've got your hand up.
Yes, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the appeal from 4A to 5A for Palo Verde girls volleyball.
You were reading my mind, sir. Thank you so much for the motion. Do we have a second?
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will second that motion.
We have a motion on the table from Mr. Polzine, a second from Mr. Larson to approve Palo Verde's girls volleyball appeal from the 4A to the 5A. Any further questions, any comments, any other discussion? Okay, all in favor, please indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you, everyone. Palo Verde's appeal has been approved. Our next one is from Green Valley Christian School. As you recall, we tabled this at our last meeting to bring back today. Mr. Paul Anderson, just point of clarification here. Do we first need to have a motion to bring this off the table, or are we good just starting up with the appeal?
No, you just, you can just start with the appeal. You tabled it, and so it's just on this agenda. You can go from there.
Okay, thank you, sir. GV Christian's letter is on page number 19 of your packet. We discussed this a little bit last week, where they are appealing to go from the 2A to the 3A in boys basketball for this next realignment cycle. Mr. Rollwing from GV Christian, I believe, is with us. Eric, are you here?
Yes, I'm here.
Okay. I'm going to turn it over to you here for a moment, sir, if you'd like to, again, just explain the rationale behind your appeal.
Rationale for my appeal, two major issues for us that are the reason why we're in front of you guys today, and thank you for having us again. The three levels of play. You know, our program has grown, so we have a varsity JV and B team, and currently in the 2A South, there are no B teams, so scheduling games for our entire program. The other, experience with the process, we've been here before, very aware of the levels. We've played everybody from the 1A all the way to the 5A over the last 10 years that we've been a part of the NIAA. And we feel like for the next 3-year cycle, we best fit with 3A, and just, due to competitive balance. And so that's why we're here in front of you. Dallas had spoke last time and said that I didn't speak to him directly. We did speak for about a half hour last week. And, I'm hopeful that I'll hear positive results, but thank you for letting me speak.
Thank you, Mr. Rolling. Mr. Larson, Mr. Fitzsimons, any of our other 2A and 3A people in the South that would like to contribute here?
Yeah, Dallas Larson, 3A South. I know Jason put out a survey for the southern schools on this, so I'll let him speak to that. But I'd also like to hear from the north, if there was any input up there on the north on this before voting or before proposing.
Mr. Odegaard, we'll go to you first, and then we'll go to the north.
Yeah, so we had 5 responses out of the 6 teams from the survey. 4 out of the 5 were in favor of Green Valley joining the 3A. So there is support for them to come in. We were hopeful for both boys and girls, but they were supportive of the boys coming in.
Mr. Cottrell.
Rob Cottrell, 3A North. The North is along the lines of supporting whatever the South felt was best for their league.
Mr. Fitzsimons, I don't know if you wanted to chime in here. I know you were in Washington, D.C. for a meeting last week, and you had some thoughts as well on GV Christian's appeal.
Yeah, we had talked about it in the South a little bit. Told Eric we'd support him in anything he wants to do. I think it's a good thing for Eric, like you said, with the 3 levels and how competitive they've been. It's kind of a good time to come into the 3A South where they're needing some teams after this latest realignment. The North is kind of with us as well, whatever we feel is best for our league, and we support them. We hate to lose a competitive team in 2A South, but at the same time, us and Ken Parker can tell you that Lincoln is going to be rebuilding next year, Needles after next year, so we're all going to be about the same, and had aspirations of maybe a 3A old school league, but with our numbers and with our rebuilding stuff, we can't sustain that. So we support them 100% if they want to go and build their program.
Anyone else in our group? Comments, discussions here? Mr. Parker, I see you're unmuted. I don't know if you wanted to speak here.
Sorry, no, I'm on the same page. Said it last week. They are up and coming, so it gets fast. It'll be a good thing.
Dallas
All right.
Stars 3A South, I'll make a motion that we allow Green Valley Christian into the 3A South boys basketball.
Sean Fitzsimons, 2A South. I'll second the motion.
Motion on the table from Mr. Larson and a second from Mr. Fitzsimons to approve Green Valley Christian's appeal from the 2A to the 3A in boys basketball. Any further discussion, comments, questions?
I just want to make the quick comment that future, like, I know a lot of mostly 1A, 2A, 3 at this point, based on enrollment, that it is more whole school. It's more the programs. I think going forward for any schools that want to appeal, it was sure for the sake of the leagues, it'd be nice to have both boys and girls. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Anyone else? Okay. All in favor of this appeal for Green Valley Christian, please indicate by unmuting and saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed, please indicate by unmuting and saying nay. Okay, thank you, everyone. Green Valley Christian's appeal from the 2A to 3A in boys basketball has been approved. And thank you to Mr. Rollwing for being here as well. Okay, next up, we go to page number 20 in our packet, and this is the appeal from Amplus Academy for its girls basketball team to be placed in the 3A. It is currently sitting in the 4A based on the approvals that we had last week. And I do believe that Ms. Cosgrove from Amplus Academy is here. And if you'd like to go ahead and unmute and again, just kind of explain the rationale behind the appeal for Amplus.
Yeah, thank you so much. Kelsey Cosgrove. I'm the athletic director at Amplus Academy. So we are a charter school. We were placed in 4A, our entire athletic program, and we have been in 4A for the last 2 years. Currently, our girls basketball team is not seeing much success, although it is a group of girls that are working very hard. Our biggest concern is sustainability of our program at this time. Between this year and last year, we did see 13 players move to a different sport. And we really believe that that is due to the competitive nature or lack thereof of our season that we've had. I put some numbers here in the letter just to give you an idea. We were outscored an average of 630 points to 175 within our league. That is an incredible disparity. There is no part of Amplus that wishes to shy away from competitive and tough games and tough schedules. That's why we're only appealing for girls basketball. We definitely want to build our programs in the most competitive environment. But at this time, we believe in order to build a foundation for girls basketball, it would be best to try our hand down in 3A, just in hopes of having more competitive games. And we also believe that that is for the benefit of those who are playing us, as well as very little teams probably got much out of those games against Amplus this year with scores like 75-5. So we're just looking at the competitive nature and hopefully being able to build a foundation for our program that we can eventually move back up where our enrollment would place us.
Thank you, Ms. Cosgrove. Any comments, any questions from our committee members? I can tell you that Amplus, of the 48 teams in the South girls basketball rubric that were scored in the rubric, Amplus was 47th of 48 over the 2-year span. Mr. Odegaard, I think you had unmuted first, and then Mr. Polzian's got his hand up right after that. Mr. Odegaard first, then Mr. Polzian.
Yeah, I have a question for Amplus. Did you play any 3A competition this year?
We did. We played several teams in various levels. So Chaparral was one. We lost that game by 5, 6, 8 points. So that was a competitive game for us. We also played schools like Cristo Rey. We lost that game by about 4 or 5 points. We also went to Beaver Dam. We did see some success playing some small schools in Arizona in a winter break tournament. We played Lund and did win that game 17-16, and we beat Beaver Dam 22-20. So those are the games where you can see some competitiveness and some success. Those were the teams that we were finding that at.
So Beaver Dam and Lund are, I believe, 1A schools. Chaparral was a 3A member this year. It is not going to be next year. I guess my concern for you would be that I think you will have fewer competitive games in league by coming to 3A than you would in 4A, just because of who is left in our league. I'm trying to just glance at your schedule a little bit. Like Moapa Valley, Virgin Valley, Boulder City, I mean, very, very strong competitive teams that I just don't, I'm not sure that you would get more competition from coming to the 3A.
Yeah, and that's fair. I think that we were looking at just the vast majority of the teams that we were playing. But yeah, that's definitely a concern. I know that those small town programs are very competitive. Yep.
Mr. Polzian, you had your hand up first, and I've got Mr. Larson and Ms. Habig also waiting in the wings. Mr. Polzian.
I would say, first of all, to Mr. Odegaard's point, I would completely agree with that. I mean, having been in the 4A, I'm sure Member Habig could state the same. I personally, just from watching 4A girls basketball the last couple of years, I think you probably would find yourself more competitive in 4A. But my question that I had is, what is the enrollment at AM Plus? I want to know the total enrollment.
We are enrolled for our high school, I believe, is around the 600 mark.
680 was the count day that we had.
Thank you. 680.
And plus being a charter school, that obviously for the purposes of alignment does get doubled. So that number became 1360. Pahrump was the cutoff, as you guys recall. We kind of made that exception to keep Pahrump into the 3A, and Pahrump's enrollment was 1333. So Amplis was, with the multiplier, 27 over that number. Mr. Larson, then Ms. Habig.
Thank you. Yeah, my question was about enrollment too. I've been, when the 3A decided that we wanted to go enrollment, and that was what we chose, I've tried to be pretty consistent as a member of this committee to stick close to that number. I feel like there have been a few schools that we've let down that were close in that number. And so I've tried to make those evaluations based on that. For some reason, I thought Amplis was a much bigger school than this that I saw. That kind of gets me to think a little bit on this, but at the same time, I agree with Jason, just looking at the teams in the new realignment in 4A based on 3A. I don't know if Amplis is going to get what they're looking for coming into the 3A. I think Jason would let us know about this. I know he put it on a survey. I think a lot of the schools, I believe were kind of in favor, but I believe that had to do a lot with one of the next agenda items, which is, state tournament kind of things, and looking at the number of schools in the 3A North compared to 3A South. So I'm torn on this one because they are close to the number, but at the same time, I don't know if they're going to find what they want here in the 3A South.
Ms. Habig, then Mr. Kofer.
All right, so mine's two things. I can tell you, you're not going to find what you want in the 3A. We were the 4A state champions and lost to a couple of 3A teams. So I think with now that the 3A is enrollment only, you're going to have some of those teams that were in the 3A that'll now be in 4A, that you will have a little bit more competitive games in 4A than you would in the 3A. I know it's terrible. I feel like girls basketball is the sport that has the most drastic jump levels of any other sport probably that we deal with. I understand what you're talking about, building programs. We're struggling to keep a program as well. I think that's a whole Southern Nevada issue. And then my second thing was also same thing. I feel like if we're going to go enrollment only 3A, we have to stick with enrollment only 3A. We have to be consistent.
Thank you, Ms. Habig. Mr. Kofer, then Mr. Odegaard.
Thank you. I would just like to say that to a certain extent, yes, trying to gauge whether 4A is going to be stronger than 3A, is a lot of times a moving target. However, I fall back on what I said years ago is the perception is that 3A, is a lower competitive level than 4A, so throughout the ranks of them trying to garner, participation, there may be a feeling within their community that, hey, okay, we go to 3, I'll go ahead and play. It looks to me like you're bumping Green Valley. We're bumping Green Valley boys up to 3A without their girls. So maybe this could be a balancing, component that could help that, as well as I don't think there would be as many required league games. I could be off because I don't know how the leagues are going to break out in 4A. So they may have a lighter schedule on 3A where they could backfill with a few more of those 1A, 2A competitors that could make their overall schedule a little bit easier. So, I think, hey, if I don't think it should be up to the committee to gauge whether they're going to have it an easier road to hoe at 3A versus 4A. I think we should look at their competitive balance in where they were. And if they feel like they want to move down, I think that should be the basis for making that decision. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Kofer. Mr. Odegaard.
Yeah, I just wanted to speak to Dallas's question about the survey. So it was pretty much split in our league, whether the other schools in the league wanted them to come in or not. So there wasn't an overwhelming yes. But I think that maybe that there was some perception that the enrollment discrepancy was larger than it is. So that's the comment on the survey.
Thank you, Mr. Odegaard. I'm going to get back to Ms. Cosgrove in just a moment here. Where we sit with girls basketball as of right now, I believe it's 33 teams that would be in that 4A Southern region. Mr. Anthium and I have talked a little bit about the formation of leagues, and that's something that after we get through the final approvals by this committee, the recommendation that goes forward to our Board of Control for its April meeting, Mr. Anthium and I are going to sit down and kind of just see what we come up with here in terms of leagues. You can see that what we've posted at this point, we don't have leagues broken out yet, but Mr. Anthium, I think we were looking at 4, potentially 5 here for girls basketball, if I remember correctly. I don't know if you wanted to chime in on that.
Yeah, I think right now we're looking at having 4 leagues.
Okay. All right. Ms. Cosgrove, you've obviously heard the discussion here from our committee. Want to get any additional thoughts that you may have?
Yeah, I appreciate Mr. Kofer bringing up that point about the scheduling, because that was also kind of in our thought process as well, just looking at the numbers wise and again, just making assumptions, not knowing how the leagues are broken up, but having more opportunities to schedule other games, because again, we're not looking to win, as much. I don't want to say we wouldn't love to win the league, but we're not looking to pad any league stats or things like that. We're simply looking to be able to have competitive games. So if we're put in a position where we have more openings on our schedule I'm so sorry, my lights went off, to schedule teams that are competitive without just having to travel for those tournaments, again, that puts us in a good spot, rather than only having a few openings to add in those teams. So that is also a point we're looking at.
Thank you, Ms. Cosgrove. Mr. Larson.
Yeah, just as I look at what would happen in the 3A South, I'm seeing if this is approved, we would have 8 Southern 3A girls. That would be 14 league games that they would be having to play, which would give them 4 non-league or 1 non-league with 3 tournaments, or yeah, is what I'm seeing on as far as on that side of things. The travel thing, I mean, you're gonna be traveling for league games, not just tournaments. And I think once again, I'm kind of with Jason. I don't want to say what's best for another school, but I feel they would be better in the South. But as a 3A member, I think I've been pretty consistent. We are enrollment, but there have been a few schools that have been close to that number. And I know we've kind of said it's, Pahrump +1. I feel like I have tried to stay consistent with as teams are close, especially with some of these charters, like with the double enrollment. If they've been close, I feel like I've been pretty consistent on trying to keep the 3A South viable and having enough teams. And so as just from scheduling and everything else, I'm thinking like Mike Kofer that they could fit in right there with the Green Valley boys, be that team on the girls' side that would make it even for our scheduling. So kind of for me with all that, man, that makes it easy on me that way. But I don't know how much easier it's going to be for them playing in the 3A South. And I would like to hear from the North again, from Rob, if it's kind of the same as Green Valley, if they're just good with what we want, or if there's anything from them on this.
Yeah, Mr. Cottrell, then Mr. Polsey. Go ahead, Mr. Cottrell.
Rob Cottrell, 3A North. I think you guys know your schools best down there and what fits in your league, and we would support, what you guys feel is best for you, and go with it for moving forward. So thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. Mr. Polsey.
I think as a counterpoint kind of to what member Coper said, I can tell you to Tammy's point, Foothill High School was in the 4A state girls tournament this year, and we have routinely lost to Pahrump and Moapa Valley on a yearly basis by lots of points, and we were in the state tournament. I feel like I have seen enough 4A girls basketball over the last 2 years to say that honestly, you would be more successful in 4A. And that's from watching a lot of basketball. I think Tammy would agree with that. And we've been in the same league and same division. And I'm going to say this again, just because it's on the record. At some point, it might be time to look at the numbers and change 1,300 to 1,700 or 1,800. So I'm just putting that out in the universe, and I'll go back to my hole.
Things out in the universe at 9:30 in the morning. That's a little scary. Any other comments or questions from our committee members? Yeah, not that the rubric or any other measurement that we take over the course of the last 2 years is not in any way a predictor of future outcomes. It never has been, it never will be. If you look at the rubric scores from the last 2 years, though, Virgin Valley, 10th among all of the 48 schools in the South that were measured. Moapa Valley, 12th of all those schools. There are 2 that sit up there pretty high. Pahrump is right down the middle, 24th of the 48. And we start to look at some of the other schools, Boulder City, 29th, the Meadows, 30th. Coral Las Vegas, which has appealed down into the 3A, they were 32nd. Cristo Rey, 44th. And then Amplus 47th. The 4A is large with the 30 plus teams. So there's a much larger range of schools, but also more schools in the in-between than there are in the 3A. Any other comments or questions from our committee members? Otherwise, we will look at entertaining a motion one way or the other here. Mr. Parker.
Just out of curiosity, independent option, if this is a rebuilding kind of situation that they could backfill or even just do independent do they have to be for an entire cycle, the 3 years, or is this something that they can maybe jump into to get those games better for them? Obviously, I think both leagues are kind of sounding overmatched based off the conversations, but is that an option?
In terms of independent status, it would be for the entirety of the cycle as we have it now. The executive director, I believe, does have the ability to waive a portion of that if he so chooses. But again, this is a 3-year cycle. In terms of whether or not Amplus would wish to go independent, keeping in mind that that is also meaning not eligible for the postseason, that's a question that only Amplus can answer.
So that's why I was running the 3-year cycle is a long time, but just
Yeah.
throwing that out there as an option.
Ms.
Yeah.
Cosgrove?
Yeah, I appreciate that. Again, we're not trying to shy away. We do want to, be exposed to some of these tougher games. I've never been someone that said that it's not good to get your butt beat sometimes. We're just looking for a better balance and a better option. So I don't think that moving to independent would fit with our vision and our overall goal for our programs that we're trying to place. We do want to stay as full members in all of our sports at this time.
Thank you, Ms. Cosgrove. Okay, any other quick comments from our committee members? All right, at this time, we would entertain a motion either to approve or to deny Amplus's appeal.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. With 1,360 enrollment, if they want to come to 3A, I will make the motion to allow Amplus to come into the 3A in girls basketball.
Motion on the table for Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Yeah.
I heard a little noise there in the background. I don't know if that was somebody trying to second or not. We'll call for it again. Do we have a second?
Jason Odegaard, 3A South. I'll second.
Okay, motion on the table for Mr. Larson, a second from Mr. Odegaard to approve Amplus Academy's appeal in girls basketball from the 4A to the 3A. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? I'm going to go for a roll call vote on this. Ms. Wonder, if you would please call the roll for the voting members. Please, when your name is called, indicate that you approve the appeal by Amplus, that you agree with the motion by saying aye or yes. If you disagree and do not agree with the appeal, please indicate by saying nay or no. Before we do that, Mr. Fitzsimons, you got your hand up.
Yes. Simple, I know it's a motion and a second, but quick discussion for 3A schools. If this is approved, you could schedule Amplus, for scheduling purposes, you could schedule Amplus girls and GB boys on the same night to help you out.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimons. Ms. Wonder, again, if you would please go with the roll call.
Hands up.
Oh, I'm sorry, Mr. Jackson.
Question. Are we violating policy and procedures?
In what way?
We've set status for policy and procedure. 3A is aligned by enrollment number.
Yeah.
Theoretically, I think we did. We have allowed for any appeals. We allowed for Coral's appeal and Worcester's appeal already to go to the 3A.
That's all I want to know.
Yep. No, I don't in any way disagree with the question at all. Just we schools have the right to appeal. It's committee's decision what they want to do with it. Okay. Ms. Wonder.
Phil Tao. Dallas Larson.
Yes.
That was a yes for me, sorry.
You're good.
I was a yes.
Jason Odegaard.
Yes.
Rob Cottrell.
Yes.
Wade Pearson.
No.
Paul Sullivan.
No.
Tammy Habig.
No.
Tony Polzine. Domingo Rivera.
Yes, sorry.
Yes.
Isabel Sanchez.
Yes.
Art Anderson.
Yes.
Darvell Bell.
Yes.
Freeman Holbrook. Chris Magrum,
Yes.
Brooke Formaster,
Yes.
Joshua Katz, Miles Baldwin,
No.
David Vick, okay, Sean Fitzsimons,
Yes.
Ken Parker,
Yes.
Mike Brooks,
Yes.
Sarah Scott.
14-4 on your count? That's what I got. Right, okay, based on the vote, 14-4 in favor of the appeal by AMPLUS to go from 4A to 3A in girls basketball has been granted by this committee and will appear on the recommendation to the Board of Control. Ms. Cosgrove, thank you for being here today.
Thank you, guys. We'll see how the next 3 years go. Appreciate it.
Okay, next up is North Tahoe, and this letter came in just a hair late for our packet. This letter came to us from Mr. Fleesock, the assistant principal at North Tahoe, and I am trying to get that up on my screen right now. Okay, North Tahoe is appealing in boys and girls basketball and girls volleyball to go from the 2A to the 3A. We have explained to North Tahoe that this appeal for volleyball is about 3 months too late and would not be heard at this time, but we do have the appeals for basketball. Mr. Fleesock, I believe you are in the room with us, sir. If you would like to go ahead and explain North Tahoe's rationale for this appeal.
Hi, good morning, everyone, and thank you for having us. We went forward with this appeal, and I apologize for coming in a little bit late. With some of the movement that we've seen in our region with 3A teams going to 4A North, and in particular, Incline High School moving their basketball and volleyball programs up from 2A to 3A. We thought it'd be an appropriate time for us to seek a similar move on our part. Our basketball programs, both our boys and girls, we have JV and varsity levels for all, and we've actually had freshman boy levels in the past. We are hoping a realignment with 3A West. Doing so would actually put us in a conference with schools in pretty close proximity, all the schools in the Tahoe Basin, as well as the surrounding areas with Sparks, Debbie Smith opening up. I know Wooster, I think, is potentially still in there, although I know I've seen a possible 4A realignment for them as well. But and these are schools that, particularly in the Basin, we have had kind of a rich history with and rivalries and traditions going back decades playing. And certainly we would love an opportunity to see that. As many of you know, if you have come up to Tahoe in the wintertime, 2A North is a pretty crowded space right now, and we do often have cancellations due to weather, and it can make rescheduling quite challenging, particularly for teams like Battle Mountain or Wendover that have to travel pretty far to come get us. From a competitive standpoint, we feel this is also a very good match. We've often aligned with 3A teams in our non-conference schedule with our basketball teams for several years. Our 2A girls basketball team has been very competitive at the state level and regionally in the past several seasons as well. So we think it's a good fit from a competitive standpoint and sustaining that moving forward. And again, I know I'm late with volleyball as well. It was kind of a Hail Mary, so I understand it's too late at this point, but definitely for basketball would be a good consideration and a good fit, we believe, moving forward.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Fleesock. Mr. Cottrell, I want to pull you in first on this discussion. I know you had sent out a survey to some of the 3A schools to kind of gauge their response to this appeal.
Yes, we sent a survey to all schools, and 10 of the 12 schools responded. It was 9 yes in favor of North Tahoe coming to the 3A, 1 against. I do know that, and Mr. Fleesock, we do have mandatory crossovers, 1-game crossovers with the East, so there will still be travel involved. With that would bring us to 13 teams with North Tahoe, which is kind of getting big. I know on the West, it would fill our schedules with 6 West Division games times 2 is 12, and the 6 crossovers puts us at 18, and then the East would have 10 plus 7 or 17. So it does help fill schedules. And it seems like this is something the league would like to have. And as always, I'd like to get the 3A South's opinion on this as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. Any of our 3A South representatives wish to comment here?
Jason, as president, do you want to go first? Do you want to let me?
Go ahead, Dallas.
I've always told the North, just like what just happened earlier, the South tries to support the North and what they feel is best for the Northern League. I do feel like me and Rob had many meetings about the North and the South and our relationship and trying to keep as best as possible the number of schools North and South for the representation of state. Having coached in West Wendover, I do know that travel, and I know I have friends in Spring Creek and Elko too that make that same trip, and I know in the past there's been some big issues with Eastern schools being able to get some of those lake schools to make the trip out. So that would be something I would be interested in hearing about from Spring Creek and from Wade on that.
Mr. Pearson, I don't know if you wanted to respond.
Yeah, I'll jump in real quick. Wade Pearson, 3A North. Obviously, I mean, where's our enrollment base going here? Because we keep working on petitions in and out, and I know we're looking at competitive balance too. But I think our league's going to get a little too big, and travel's always an issue. Yeah, they commit to it now. We don't know, and we have so many issues going down the road that coming from Reno area, we have issues, and it's tough going into the season. And the biggest thing on our end is lower levels. We have freshman teams, and when we commit to these games, just for instance, we had our teams missed 3 games just by crossing over, and we're not getting those games. And that's where our big thing is. We got to fill in our tournaments with our lower levels, and that's what makes our teams better. And so we're not crazy in favor of it right now, and we got to see that happen.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Obviously, in North Tahoe's case, being a member of the 2A, and I don't know if Mr. Brooks is with us or not, if he may want to comment on this as well. They've had some travel to go to West Wendover and play games there as well. That 2A is every bit as spread out in the North as the 3A is. But Mr. Brooks, if you're with us, I don't know if you wanted to add any additional comments here.
Sure. Our league was, not that it matters that much, I guess, but our league was split. I think I got 7 responses, 4 yes and 3 no to North Tahoe leaving us, especially this late. I think that with incline going up, I think that has opened up another week of games. So if travel is an issue with weather, we do have an additional week we can use now if we needed to. So I don't know if that's a big issue, but I don't have much feeling for this either way. I would be glad to keep them in the 2A. I think that would help the league, but if they really wanted to go, I don't think that would harm us too much either. So.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Any other of our committee members with any comments or questions? Ms. Sanchez, I see you were unmuted. I didn't know if you wanted to make a comment here.
Oh my gosh. No, I'm so sorry. I've been unmuted this whole time. I'm glad I wasn't chatting away.
No worries. No worries. Trying to pay attention to unmutes and hand raises and all that good stuff. So Mr. Levitt, you've got your hand up, and then Mr. Fitzsimons. Mr. Levitt, if you would unmute, please.
As a consultant, and I keep hearing in both these last appeals the issue with the number and sticking to the number. And I was just kind of curious, what is Worcester's enrollment in that they were granted an appeal by this committee and the Board of Control basically for all sports to remain in the 3A. So how far over that Elko +1 are they with respect to staying in the 3A and in that they've been approved for that? And just with respect to the conversation of sticking to the number.
If I can get my Google sheet to load, I will tell you. Worcester's enrollment 1338 was the count date number they came back with. Elko was actually 1407.
Yeah, okay.
So, and North Tahoe's enrollment, just in case anybody was asking about it, North Tahoe came back at 468. So North Tahoe enrollment wise, for where those numbers are drawn, that fit can really go either way. Mr. Fitzsimons.
Thank you, Bart. Yeah, that was my question, was the enrollment for North Tahoe, because if you remember, they were slated to possibly go to 3A and other sports last fall. So that was my one part of my comment. My second part is, I know 3A has fought for years to kind of keep teams somewhat even north and south. If North Tahoe comes in, that's 13, I believe, for basketball, and then Southern 3A is 6.
8 after the appeal for girls basketball.
8 after the appeal. So I know that's a different can of worms, the policies and procedures and tournament formats. But if I was a Southern 3A member, I'd be getting a little nervous about, back in the old days when we'd only get one team because we had 4 or 5 in the South and they'd have 3 at the state level. So just a comment, just 2 cents. Thanks.
Thank you. Any other comments or questions from our committee members? Mr. Fleesock, anything you would like to add, sir, after hearing some of the discussion?
Yeah, and I know just the enrollment numbers came up. I know I had presented to this committee before. We are in a declining enrollment. We were projected to go down to 419 and then 418 the year after that. And that's kind of normally where North Tahoe kind of hovers. We did have some kind of cohorts that pushed through that brought the enrollment numbers up in recent years. But with that said, we've always, fielded robust basketball programs, both on our boys and our girls side, and have, certainly anticipate being able to continue to do so throughout the next realignment cycle. And I just want to thank everyone again for your time and your ears this morning.
Thank you, Mr. Fleesock. Okay, at this point, unless we have any other comments from our committee members, we would entertain a motion on North Tahoe's appeal in basketball to move from the 2A to the 3A.
Rob Cottrell, 3A North. I make a motion for North Tahoe to move up to the 3A girls boys basketball.
Motion from Mr. Cottrell. Do we have a second?
Chris Magrum, 4A 5A North. I'll second the motion to allow North Tahoe into the Northern 3A.
Thank you, Mr. Magrum. Motion from Mr. Cottrell, a second from Mr. Magrum to approve North Tahoe's appeal from the 2A to the 3A in boys and girls basketball. Any further comments, questions, or discussion? Ms. Wonder, I'm going to ask again for a roll call vote on this one. I'm sorry, but sorry to make you do some extra work here, but
No
just want to make sure we have the correct numbers.
Well, I guess I'll start with the 2A then. Sean Fitzsimons,
No.
Ken Parker, Mike Brooks,
No.
Sarah Scott, Phil Cow,
Yes.
Dallas Larson,
No.
Jason Odegaard,
No.
Rob Cottrell,
Yes.
Wade Pearson,
No.
Paul Sullivan,
No.
Tammy Habig,
No.
Tony Polzine,
No.
Domingo Rivera,
Yes.
Isabel Sanchez,
Ms. Sanchez left the room and just came
Okay.
back in. Ms. Wonder, if you would give her just a second to
Yeah.
reconnect and then just go ahead and call for her again, please.
Art Anderson,
Yes.
Darvell Bell,
Yes.
Freeman Holbrook,
Yes.
Chris Magrum,
Yes.
Isabel Sanchez. Yes. Yes, is what I heard.
Yep. Is that the completion of the vote?
Oh, sorry about that. Brooke Formaster,
No.
Joshua Katz, Miles Baldwin,
No.
David Vitt. I know he was having problems unmuting.
I have 10-8 against. Ms. Wonder, Mr. Jackson, Mr.
I have the
Paul
same.
Anderson.
I have a different count, Bart.
What do you have, sir?
I could not hear Katz, Parker, or Scott, so I need to know what they voted.
No Katz vote, no Parker vote, no Scott vote.
Okay, so they were no votes, okay.
No, there weren't no votes. Mr. Katz and
No, I mean, they did not.
were not vote,
weigh
did not
in.
vote. Yes.
Okay, so I have 10-8 then, okay.
Okay, so by a vote of 10-8, North Tahoe's appeal to go from the 2A to the 3A in boys and girls basketball has been denied by this committee. Mr. Fleesock, thank you so much for being here, sir.
Thank you all very much.
Okay. We have one more appeal, and that is from Liberty High School, appealing in boys and girls bowling to go from the 4A to the 5A. I know Mr. Goroff is here from Liberty. I'll let him speak in just a moment. Just some reference points here for the committee. Bowling, we took the top 8 in the rubric scores and put them in the 5A. Liberty was number 9. They were the team just on the bottom of that line. Mr. Goroff, if you'd like to go ahead and speak here, sir, and just kind of give us the background here for the appeal.
Yeah, I don't have a whole bunch for you guys. Good morning. Just that from my coach who's been coaching the sport for past 14, 15 years, looking at the rubric, we've been in the state semis 22, 23. We didn't make the playoffs in 24, and then this past year we came in second place in state. So we were state runner-ups with the boys. Girls have been struggling a little bit last couple of years, but over the course of the last 10, 12 years, they've been pretty solid. We've been kind of down, but we're also young and we've been competitive this year. So my coach assures me that we'll be fine. So I don't really have a whole bunch more than that.
Thank you, Mr. Goroff. Again, Liberty was 9th in the rubric, pretty balanced between the two. The boys at a plus 399, the girls at a plus 294. We drew the line where we did because every one of the programs ahead of them had at least one program, one of the two, that averaged better than 700. They weren't necessarily as consistent as scoring as Liberty has been over the 2 years. But again, this is one of those where we drew the line between 8 and 9, and now number 9 would like to join the top 8. Questions or comments from our committee members here? Mr. Polsey.
No, I'd just like to make a motion that we approve Liberty's appeal from 4A to 5A in both boys and girls bowling.
Dallas Larson, 3A South, I'll second.
Motion on the table for Mr. Polsey and a second for Mr. Larson to approve Liberty's appeal in bowling from the 4A to the 5A. Any further questions or any discussion or comments? I think we can just go straight to a voice on this one. All in favor of approving Liberty's appeal from the 4A to the 5A, please indicate by unmuting and saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay, Liberty's appeal has been approved by our committee and will move forward to the Board of Control on the entirety of our recommendation for the April meeting. Mr. Goroff, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Do we have anybody else here who wishes to appeal? I have not gotten any documentation on anyone else, but I don't want to leave anyone out of the equation.
Bart, the only thing I've received since we have started was that email I just forwarded to you, but it is not an appeal. It is a discussion. It's a public comment or statement or whatever about playoff format.
Okay, all right. In that case, we will close item number 6. Mr. Paul Anderson, wanted to get your thoughts on this one. Item number 7 is actually a review of the alignments, but I know in talking with you during our last meeting, this is a little bit duplicitous. If we've gone ahead and approved everything and approved every team in each spot, do we need to go ahead and revisit item number 7 or no?
I don't believe so, unless anyone's got any issues with anything that's been voted on. And if they don't, I'd just move forward.
That I will tell you that works for me moving forward. Let's move on then to item number 8. Tournament formats and all classifications for fall sports. And I know we've got a rather lengthy list here of public comment, and I am going to, if you give me just a moment, I'm going to first bring in Mr. Corey Anderson into our meeting. I know he wishes to make public comment. Mr. Corey Anderson, I think you've joined us. If you could unmute and just let me know you're here. Mr. Corey Anderson, are you here with us? I see you, but I just want to make sure you can hear us.
Oh, no, you're here?
Yes, I can hear you. I was
Okay,
trying to
okay.
get my speaker, so I didn't have your echo.
I believe you had public comments, sir, on tournament formats, and I know you represent a coaches association. So when you're ready, you would have 5 minutes if you'd like to go ahead with your public comments, sir.
Thank you. Good morning. As Bart said, I'm Corey Anderson. I'm a teacher here at Liberty High School, the former head track and cross country coach here. I also serve the athletes and coaches of Southern Nevada and the Coaches Association. The public comment I'm making is about cross country postseason format, referencing on page 24 in the meet packet. I can't fully speak for the Coaches Association because the proposed reductions, I was completely unaware of it until yesterday, just like every other coach in the state of Nevada, in both the North and South, as is confirmed by the Northern Coaches Association as well, but they were unaware until I brought it to their attention yesterday. I'm very confident that had the coaches of Northern or Southern been aware of this proposal, that you'd have many more of them here today to voice their concern and speak on the issue. I think we do have some public comment from people that were concerned when they learned of this as well. My personal opinion is the reduction of the state meet opportunities in Nevada cross country doesn't logically follow any of the participation data, any of the performance trends in the state, and it doesn't mirror the norms of any other peer state, or quite frankly, any other state at all in any sort of format. There's just no precedence and basis for reducing teams any lower. As far as I can see, our 2A is currently the lowest number of teams in the country by not even 1 or 2, by 4 teams that are allowed in there. I couldn't find another state that had less than 10, except for states that combine classifications to make one bigger race, because they understand that the essence of cross country is you need participation to have displacement. That's exactly how you determine who the best is, meaning that you need people in the race that are not going to win the race. Looking at some data, according to the NFHS publication information, since our last realignment, participation in Nevada is up 16%. For the sake of time and numbers, I'm only going to recite the boys because the girls follow. But in 2022, we had 877 participants in cross country in Nevada. 2023 up to 951. In 2024 up to 1,014. So the trends are going that cross country is increased participation in this cycle. So again, it doesn't make a lot of sense to me that we're eliminating opportunities for Nevada athletes. On the performance side of things, I mean, you'd be hard pressed to say anything other than we're in a complete golden era of cross country that nobody's ever seen before in Nevada. Both big schools, small schools, teams, boys, girls, elite individuals, everything of that nature. To give you a reference, in 2023, Faith Lutheran's Logan Scott, he won state championship, lowered the all-time Nevada record at the veteran state course, which hadn't been broken in since 2010 or 2010. By the end of that season, Carson Wetzel, another athlete, had beat him and lowered the record even further. A week later, they go to the north, and he gets beat by two other athletes who are all debatably the greatest runners ever in Nevada. Now we go a year later. This year at the state meet, we had 7 boys from 3 different classifications, including the small classifications we're talking about reducing, that were under the previous all-time greatest performance ever in Nevada. So it's big schools, small schools. Everybody's doing well in cross country. It just kind of asks the question, like, why are we messing with things? You know, we look at the girls, it's the same thing. We have, you know, in the north we had Eleanor Raker, who was testing some of the greatest times ever. She had the highest finish ever in by Nevada athletes, second at West Region. We come back a year later, she's better. And another athlete, you know, bests her in one of the 2 of the greatest races ever, or the best times ever at that course, because of the competition and the numbers are being up. From the team side, we have small schools that are doing well. Sky Point, they got an invite to a national championship level meet. Shadow Ridge boys and girls. Well, we've never had that many teams or any teams that have been invited to compete at that level. So performance-wise, it's hard pressed to see a reason why we would do anything other than add or at least keep the participation levels that we have. So if performance levels are where they're at, if numbers are increasing, if we look at other states and we find similar states like like New Mexico, that's similar size, they have 34% of their population makes the state meet. In the similar across the board, other states, Arkansas, Connecticut, they had percentages as high as 42% of their athletes are making it. We're one of the lowest in the country, and we're talking about reducing participation.
Sorry, sir, that is time. That is 5 minutes.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you so much for joining us today. Thank you for your comment. Ms. Wonder, I believe you've gotten a few by electronic purposes, if you would like to go ahead with those.
Okay. First one is from Garrett Hilton and Jill Serranio. I really hope this might be an opportunity for the 1A to find a more equitable solution to the basketball playoff statewide. Our conference is competitive, and while I think everyone who coaches in it understands and embraces the assignment, I'm hopeful that we can find a more balanced postseason format that allows for A, the best teams to qualify for the tournament, and B, create semifinal matchups that are more entertaining and competitive than quarterfinal matchups. Personally, I think it's time to move to a more modern format that allows teams a more equitable opportunity to earn their way to the state tournament. Every other state in our region uses some sort of ranking system, RPI, quali, max preps, etc., to determine their postseason fields. Oregon, Utah, and Arizona use it to determine their fields and seed. Washington has a selection committee, sectional, regional, double elimination state format, plus RPI to determine their field. Idaho splits state tournaments based on conference size. Bigger conferences get more spots, and then rank by RPI. Southern CIF and California use RPI to sort postseason. In New Mexico, conference and district championships automatically qualify for state, and then a selection committee selects the rest of the field with selection criteria, including max preps rankings. I see no reason why Nevada should continue to be left behind, and I think that the 1A would be an outstanding pilot for an RPI quali system in the state. My suggestion, if the NIAA would already like to extend the state tournament to 2 weekends as proposed, and I suggest we add 1 day of play and expand the field from 8 to 16 teams. A state tournament of this size has precedent regionally. The regular season champion of each of the 4 leagues would qualify automatically and receive the top 4 seeds ranked by RPI. The next 12 teams by RPI would then slot into the bracket and play Friday, Saturday of what is currently the week of divisionals. The final 4 would be held the week of state. The opening round of quarterfinals would be held at a single location: Elko, Winnemucca, Reno, Vegas, etc. This format would eliminate any arguing over conference size representation. Hosting the same place would avoid splitting fans with both boys and girls, and it would account for, however, the best team cycle over time. Most importantly, it would maximize the number of student athletes who get to participate in the state tournament while also ensuring the best 4 teams would earn their way to the semifinals. Personally, there are plenty of other options. I would advocate for keeping our current 8-team format and adding open regionals sorted by RPI to determine participants at state. But this is the cleanest, easiest way to do things, and it solves many of the problems and complaints I hear every year. I have a few general thoughts that has led me this direction. 1, taking 2 teams from each league makes a little more sense moving forward, particularly on the girls' side. Even placing any sort of ranking or performance aside, the West and East both have 7 teams. The South and the Central each have 4. If that's what makes the most geographic sense to me, so be it. But you can't pick and choose between geographic convenience and competitive balance whenever it's most convenient. It doesn't make sense that
I apologize, Ms. Wonder, but that is time.
Okay, thank you. The next one is from Nick Archangel. Okay. Dear members of the NIAA, I am the girls and boys head cross country coach for Coral Academy of Science, Las Vegas, Sandy Ridge campus. I am writing in opposition to the postseason change to limit the 3A to 3 teams. In my opinion, it will hurt schools like ours that are still developing programs by eliminating a key motivational factor. I have coached Coral's runners for the past 3 years. I've worked hard to keep the program alive and grow the sport in the school. Cross-country training starts in July and is a tough, demanding sport that has challenges attracting runners. One of our incentives for our student athletes is the chance to make it to regional and state championships. I'm proud to say the Coral's boy team made it to state this year as a 4th place team. I respectfully ask that you reconsider this change and support cross-country athletes by providing them the opportunity to compete in the postseason as it has been the case in prior seasons. Thank you for your consideration. Okay, the next one was from Corey, but he did speak, so we're going to skip that one. All right. This next one is from Gary Watkins. I've been a cross-country coach for the NIAA for 14 years. I have represented the rural and smaller schools in the southern region for the past 5 years. I have discussed at length with most of these coaches over the past 14 years issues involving cross-country. I believe that I can speak for most of them in the matter of reduction of state qualifiers at the 3A and even the 2A level. Additionally, it seems as if the NIAA has decided on a course of action with this reduction to punish the 3A and 2A schools because of the location in which the students and their parents have decided to reside. Some of these families are multi-generational families who remain in these locations for lifestyle choices and commitment to community. These families are supporters of cross-country and are willing to travel for miles each week in order to provide the necessary support for their children who decide and have a certain expertise in running, whether it be cross-country or track. My main focus is cross-country. However, I also advocate for those athletes who run track and field and the pride these small communities always exhibit in caring for their children and their athletes. It may not resonate with larger schools like it does with the small rural schools. According to the fall realignment, 2A has 10 Southern region teams and 9 Northern region teams. 3A has 9 Southern and 11 Northern. 4A has 29 Southern teams divided into Mountain 15, Desert 14 divisions with no Northern teams involved. 5A has 11 Southern and 9 Northern region teams. But the unrealistic nature of the state qualifying teams always mystifies the rural and smaller schools. Here are the reasons why. 1, 5A has 20 teams and currently, before this realignment tomorrow, qualifies 5 Northern and 5 Southern. And if the proposal is adopted, bumped down to 4 Northern and 4 Southern. 4A has 27 teams and currently, before this realignment tomorrow, qualifies in 18 total, all Southern region. And if the proposal is adopted, it remains the same. 3A has 20 teams and currently, before this realignment tomorrow, qualifies 4 Northern and 4 Southern. And if the proposal is adopted, bumped down to 3 North and 3 South. The 2A has 19 teams, and currently, before this realignment tomorrow, qualifies 3 Northern and 3 Southern, and if the proposal is adopted, it remains the same. This would represent an unfair and discriminatory disadvantage to the 4A and 3A schools. I believe that the 2A remaining at the 3 North and 3 South is unfair and discriminatory as well. 5A, 3A, 2A all have 20 teams that compete season long for the opportunity to go to state, and yet the 3A and 2A schools, because of the size and location, mostly rural, only qualify 3 teams on each side. I get this indicates either coaches and the athletes either don't work as hard at preparing the athletes for competition, or the policy is unfair and discriminatory. 4A schools are loaded with schools that either have been bumped up by the NIAA charter, who do not participate in all sports across the board, or schools who do not either have enough points on the rubric to qualify or do not have enough points yet to be petitioned to stay in the 4A. They are asked to still just qualify 4 teams. I feel this is also unfair when they have at least 7 more teams than any other
I
division.
apologize, Ms. Wonder, but that is time.
Thank you. Okay. Next one. Dear Realignment Committee members, I am writing to request a change to the girls wrestling postseason format that has been proposed. We are proposing to split the Southern region into 2 regions and take the top 4 placers from each region, including the North. To clarify, the regions would be 1 in the North and 2 in the South, taking the top 4 from each region to state. The reason for this proposal is growth. As an athletic director and wrestling coach, I have seen the sport grow substantially in the last 2 years, despite reluctance to sanction it as an official sport. As part of this amazing change, the participation numbers in the South have ballooned and created a problem. This year in the Southern region had 221 athletes from 41 teams competing at the girls' regionals, with the 120-pound weight class maxing out at 32 wrestlers. Meanwhile, the North had 135 athletes from 25 teams, with 14 wrestlers making it up to the biggest weight class at regionals. Since the South has nearly double the number of athletes, it does not seem to represent the competitive spirit and equity that Nevada athletics seeks to provide when we are talking about the same number of qualifiers as the North. In addition, the South has 41 teams, which has the potential, combined with our population, to grow much faster than the North. For some perspective, the biggest bracket for any boys regional tournament at any classification was 16. This does not seem like an equal opportunity compared to the boys wrestling regionals, and I am sure would be an interesting Title IX topic. This bottlenecks at the girls Southern regional has already started to deter female wrestlers and coaches even from wrestling and regional tournament, stunning the growth of our programs. After communicating with our other coaches in the South, we have the following. See below. Supporting this proposal, we submit to the Board of Control for approval to split the girls Southern regional tournament into 2 regions. At the bare minimum, please take a pause and ask for guidance. Nick Bear, Cheyenne, Ryan Oast, Desert Oasis, David Kennedy, Canyon Springs, Iris Pineda, Coronado, Reyes Gonzalez, Faith Lutheran, Ryan Anderson, Moapa Valley, Marcus Johnson, Western, Aaron Watts, Rancho, Tommy Ezekiel Valley, Tony Terry, Sierra Vista, Kazad White from Clark, Michael Dean Bonanza, David Mackey Basic. Okay. Hang on one second, everyone. Okay. Hello, this is Brent Lewis, head football coach in Moapa Valley. I want to make a comment on keeping the 3A crossover game in the semifinals of the playoff round. The 3A has a long tradition of competitiveness, and I believe that the 3A is the most competitive league in all of Nevada. I've been the head coach for 25 years here at Moapa, and I love the opportunity to play a northern school in the semis. We develop rivalries between North and South, as well as relationships between the coaches and players. If we eliminate this round, it will not only lose a long storied tradition, but also forces us to play in one of our own league opponents, again, for the second time, which becomes repetitive. Please consider keeping this tradition in place, not just for me, but for the 3A altogether. I don't necessarily speak for the 3A, but I'm pretty sure most of the 3A coaches would agree. Thank you for your time and consideration, Brent Lewis, Moapa Valley. Last one is from Scott Thrasher. 5A cross country is the most competitive classification in the state of Nevada. It also has the highest participation rate of any division. Why would we reduce the number of teams participating? Limiting the number of teams that go to state doesn't just make the state meet better. A deeper field actually allows you who the best team is. Every place, every spot, every athlete matters. I don't understand why we want to take opportunities away from student athletes that work so hard both in and out of the classroom. Thank you for taking the time to read my response. And That is it for public comment that I have received.
All right, I've got one here that Mr. Jackson, you forwarded to me. This comes to us from Shayna Wilkins. Good morning. I wanted to make an official statement from the Northern Nevada Track and Cross Country Coaches Association regarding the postseason cross-country format being proposed at the meeting today. As an association, we are struggling to understand why a proposal is being made today that was not shared with the Northern or Southern Nevada Coaches Associations ahead of time. As an association, we are working hard to bring together all coaches in track and field and cross country to create one voice for the North. We want to express our concerns for the process that this proposal went through. It is my understanding that neither the Northern Nevada Association nor the Southern Nevada Association were given prior notice. Therefore, the coaches had no idea this new proposal was on the table for us to weigh in on. I want to reiterate what was stated by Corey Anderson, president of Southern Nevada Track Cross Country Coaches Association. The proposal lists a reduction to the number of teams that are set to qualify for the state cross-country meet in both 5A and 3A classifications. Is someone able to give clarification on a few things that I am able to update and educate the cross-country coaches of Southern Nevada on this proposal? One, who submitted the proposal on page 23 of the meeting packet? Two, what is the reasoning behind the proposal on page 23 of the meeting packet? Three, is my understanding correct that none of the cross-country coaches in Southern Nevada were informed or asked their opinion about the proposal on page 23 of the meeting packet? These are also our questions and concerns in the North. The initial question for my coaches is what is best for athletes. Since the association heard about this last minute, we were not able to make public comment, but hope that principals represented can express our concerns within the group. As an association, we are just asking for an opportunity to have the information to present to our members ahead of time and be able to agree on a position for all levels so we can make public comment or submit a position statement from the association on upcoming proposals. Thank you for your time. Shayna Wilkins, DeMonte Ranch High School. Do believe also, Mr. Sullivan, you'd put a message here in the chat that Fernley High has public comment. Do you have someone live there, sir, to give public comment?
I don't, but I received an email from my cross-country coach that he'd like to share. Again, he was hit with a surprise on this yesterday when he received the email, as did I. I got the email yesterday. So I would like to share his thoughts if I could.
Yeah, please do.
So again, this is from Fernley High School's cross-country coach. His name is Christian Slater. The proposal to decrease the number of entries into the state meet for cross-country goes against the purpose of the NIAA to promote the students in all activities. Compared to other states in our region, the state meet is one of the biggest meets and a highlight of the season. In California, each division has approximately 200 student athletes competing. In Idaho, each division has approximately 100 student athletes competing. In Utah, each division has approximately 125 student athletes competing. With this proposal, our participation would decrease to approximately 60 student athletes per division. This is not healthy for the sport and does not allow for students to be encouraged to compete. Nevada has never had a team to qualify for cross-country nationals, and by continuing to gatekeep the championship level events, it doesn't allow for growth and opportunities that encourage students to participate in athletics, which in turn helps to keep them in school and working hard in their classes. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Sullivan. Do we have any other public comment regarding tournament formats at this time? Okay. Let me get back to sharing my packet now. If I can find where it went. We will move on here to part A of item number 8. And in your packet, that begins on page number 23. And these tournament format recommendations, what we are proposing, this is no different than when we start out proposing an idea for an alignment. This is not necessarily what we are saying you have to go with. This is the launch point for these. This is something that Mr. Jackson and I met about a week ago. We involved some other people in the discussion. But again, as we look at this, this is what we are coming up with. It is not our job to finalize this. This committee will end up making a recommendation that will go forward to our Board of Control, and the Board of Control will, as it does, have the final say. I swear my packet's around here someplace. Mr. Jackson, I don't know if you want to make any comments here starting out on this while I pull that packet back up.
Not in particular.
And I apologize. Give me just one moment. And there we go. All right. Let's move to page number 24 and discuss cross country. What you can see at the top, those are our current formats: 5 teams and 7 individuals from each side of the state. In 5A, 4 and 7 from each southern region, 4 and 7 from each side of the state in 3A, and 2A, 3 and 7 from each side of the state. What we are looking at is the top 4 teams in the 5A. That's part of what we are saying at this point, would reduce 1 team. No change to the 4A. The 3A would be top 3 teams and 7 individuals, as we're down to 20 teams in the 3A. The 2A would also be the top 3 teams and 7 individuals from each side of the state. We are not taking away, and when you see in these playoff formats, we are not in any way dictating what the region tournament needs to look like. We're not taking opportunities away in the region tournament, and we are not specifying as we get into other sports what those region tournaments should look like. We believe that is better suited for the region to decide. Ms. Habig, your hand is up, and I'll let you speak here first.
I think, hearing a lot of public comment, I guess my question would be, what is your guys' reasoning for this recommendation?
Twofold on this one. One, we look at the state tournament, and we try to equate this across all sports. The state tournament to us is something that should be elite. It should be your top teams that are competing there. There's a reason we don't have a 16-team state tournament, let's say, in basketball. We narrow that down to 4. We have a region tournament that determines who should move forward from that. The second part of this, we have heard from certain members of our Board of Control regarding travel and the concerns therein. What we get to in some sports, cross country to not the extent of others, but to a certain extent, is we do then have individuals who are unable to compete, and we are advancing the next individual in. That's a discussion we're going to have when we get to the wrestling part of it. We look at it as, again, this should be the cream of the crop in your state tournament. I will tell you that my own personal feeling on this, I'm not one that likes taking a whole bunch of teams that have already been beaten by somebody to go forward. I do understand, especially when it comes to a sport like cross country, you might not have had your best race on that course on that day, and you might have finished 2nd, 3rd, 4th, maybe your best races to come. I do get that part of it as well. But again, we kind of look at this as the state tournament being, it really should be the elite. Mr. Larson?
Yeah, I just want to make it known that I'm in favor of not making things smaller. I think kids deserve the chance, no matter how elite they are, to represent their school and their league at state. That's just making it there is a huge accomplishment for some of these kids. So I'm gonna make the motion that we stay with the current, based on what I heard. I'm gonna just make the motion we stay with that current, the 5A top 5 teams, 7 individuals, 4A top 4 teams, 7 individuals, 3A top 4 teams, 7 individuals, and 2A top 3 teams, 7 individuals.
Okay, we have a motion on the table from Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Art,
No, go ahead, Art.
thanks, Derville. A motion and a comment then real quick, because my concern is with what's coming up with wrestling as well, where we're taking away opportunities for kids. I guess if it's the board's, if the board,
We have a motion on the floor, on the table.
We need to have a second before we have any discussion.
Have a second first.
All right, I second the motion from Mr. Larson.
Okay, we have a motion on the table from Mr. Larson, a second from Mr. Art Anderson to keep
Thanks,
the
Art.
current
Can I-
tournament formats.
Can I make a comment then too, please?
Yeah, just if you give me just 1 second.
Sure.
To keep the current playoff formats for cross country rolling into the next cycle. Now, any other questions, comments, or discussions? Mr. Art Anderson.
Again, I'm going to have another concern with the wrestling format when we come up to that. But along with cross country taking away opportunities from kids to compete, I haven't heard from either, like at least in the north and the south, the main school districts that making those cuts are necessary. I know Mr. Jackson stated that might have come from some of the Board of Control. I guess it's going to have to be the Board of Control that makes those comments then when this comes up to a vote for them, because if that's the concern, I can understand that concern. But without really knowing that for sure, taking away these opportunities is what I think that's what the comment that everybody's trying to make.
Any other comments, questions, discussion?
Darrell Bell, 4A5A North.
Mr.
Just to kind of reiterate too what Mr. Anderson was saying, the one thing I think we need to take into consideration is one, I don't know that this proposal has the support. It doesn't look like it has the support of our Northern or Southern Nevada Coaches Association. And they certainly felt blindsided by the proposal, had no idea, which I know in the past, we've given opportunities for Coaches Association to reach out to their members to get some feedback and comments. So just want to make that noted.
Thank you, Mr. Bell. Mr. Polzien.
Pardon my ignorance here. I've only been in athletics for, 10 years or so now. I know with swimming and so, are there no qualifying standards at all in cross country currently? Okay, thank you. I was just curious.
Any other comments, questions, discussion?
Isabel Sanchez, 4A5A South. Everyone's kind of saying the same thing, but I just wanted to recognize also my concern with kind of maybe a larger impact for post-secondary opportunities. This cross-country time, the season or the option sometimes for invitational is so much shorter than some of our other sports. And if colleges are looking at state meets for opportunities for seats in their universities and their institutions, I think we just need to be cognizant of larger impacts. And I know everyone here is, and so I just wanted to state that for the record, please.
Thank you, Ms. Sanchez. Any other comments, questions, discussion? Okay, the motion on the table is to keep the current formats for cross-country through the next realignment cycle. So it would be on the top of that would stay in place at this point. We have a motion on the table in a second. I don't think we need to go to roll call on this one. We'll just go all in favor of keeping those playoff formats current into the next cycle. Please indicate by saying aye.
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 Are there any opposed? Okay. We move forward to football. And Mr. Jackson, I'm going to pull you in on this one too. I just want to make sure, as we've gone through the process with open 5A and 4A, everything I've got there is correct.
Thanks, Bart. Let me double check it again. I've looked at it so many times.
I'm the same way.
Yeah. So I want the committee to remember that this was part of the proposal brought to the board that was approved, that 4A, 5A, and open were set up this manner with the approved alignment. So the approved alignment stipulated that the 4A, 5A, and the open look at gosh, I cannot speak this morning. Take this format. So that's correct, Bart. 1A, 2A, and 3A are as presented here.
Yeah. Thank you, Mr. Jackson. We did have a public comment already talking about this, and it's one thing that we want to have the discussion on here today. For our 1A, 2A, and 3A, they do a cross-state semifinal where the higher seeded team on one half of the state hosts the lower seeded team on the other half of the state's 2A, 3A, especially do that. The 1A plays their semifinals at a neutral site. The last couple of years, it's either been Beatty or Fernley. What that does is it does kind of leave in limbo where that state championship would necessarily be played. We have it scheduled out where the state championship is scheduled to be on one half of the state, but if both teams in that championship game are from the opposite half of the state, we do move that. Mr. Jackson, this was something we talked about also as we try to lock down venues and some of the offers that we receive with our what would be six championship games now. It does create a little bit of a scramble. And I'm not putting forward here that we have to go one way or the other. I don't want you to understand that. But I want to have this discussion to try to figure out what is really best here. If we want to have that locked in so that travel plans and everything else can be made by schools and districts, or if the smaller school classifications would like to keep their cross-state semifinals. Mr. Baldwin, you've got your hand up.
So in talking with a few of our ADs in the 1A and the 1A North in particular, we ended up with a 1A state final game where it was South versus South, and those were by far probably the two best teams in the state. We kind of just feel that by pigeonholing us into a North-South situation, we may not have the best game as the final game. The semifinal games might end up being the better of the games, which we don't want. And my superintendent would probably disagree with me. I don't see, so let's say it's a year where the 1A and the 3A are slated to play at Allegiant Stadium, and you end up with a Spring Creek versus Elko game in the 3A championship at Allegiant Stadium. I don't know if anybody would be too upset. Obviously, the travel would be kind of silly, but the opportunity to play in Allegiant, if it's scheduled for that year, I think a lot of schools up north would be okay with playing each other, because if we're looking at if I'm looking at, say, Wells against Pyramid Lake, we're going to have to travel there anyway. So we're going to the time on the road. If we have to go south, we go south, if that makes sense.
Got a few hands up here. Let's go Mr. Fitzsimons, then Mr. Pearson.
Yeah, thanks, Bart. Similar to what Miles said, we've kicked this around in the 2A when we saw the agenda, when we saw the packet. Mr. Brooks from the Northern 2A agrees with me that even though we are in these smaller districts, we feel that our administration and our superintendents, travel isn't an issue. We know that's what we expect. Southern 2A, there's only 5 playing football schools, and to have to whittle down to North versus South where we play them again in addition to the regular season, we want to keep it as is, where it's a crossover state semifinal game. It's built some good rivalries over the years. Also, 3 years ago, Meadows and Lincoln County played at Allegiant, 2 South teams, clearly the 2 best teams in the state. That was 3 years ago. 2 years ago, Lake Mead and Pershing County, clearly the 2 best teams. And then last year you had a Northern versus Northern with Pershing and Incline, two best teams. So a lot like Mr. Baldwin said, we want to keep it because we feel the 2 best teams in the state will play regardless of where.
Thank you, Mr. Fitzsimons. Mr. Pearson, then Mr. Cottrell, then Ms. Formaster.
Yeah, I'll just follow suit with what they said. Obviously, for state championship, you want the best 2 teams in there. That's how brackets set up to work. And if we're down to that level of teams, travel's not an issue. They're going to make it. We're going to get there. And obviously, we don't have an issue, but hey, it's a state finals. I mean, that's let's get to the state finals, and not going to complain about that at all. So I'm in favor of the north-south crossovers for the semis for sure in the 3A. And I would assume the other leagues would be similar to that too.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson. Mr. Cottrell.
Rob Cottrell, 3A North. It is overwhelmingly 3A North football coaches would like to continue with the state crossover. As I think it was Mr. Fitzsimons said, there's been some opportunities for schools to play schools from the South that we normally don't get to play in league games, and creates those opportunities where we get play in a playoff atmosphere. The one thing I know that puts a burden on the NIAA on finding maybe the best site for our student athletes, and our communities would have to understand that, we may be playing state championship game at a high school site as opposed to Allegiant or Mackey Stadium.
Thank you, Mr. Cottrell. I want to jump in real quick. I'm going to get to Ms. Formaster, then Mr. Larson, and Mr. Jackson after that. I want everybody to realize we're not guaranteed Allegiant at any point. That has worked out extremely well because of the extreme generosity of the Las Vegas Raiders and Allegiant Stadium. Until an NFL schedule comes out, we have no idea what their schedule is going to be and whether or not it will fit. We don't know that the Raiders will continue to offer the amazing gift that they have. I don't want anybody to assume that there's anything long-term out there. We certainly hope there is, but I don't want anybody to just operate under the assumption that there will be. Okay, Ms. Formaster.
Brooke Formaster, 1A South. I just wanted to throw in the 80s that I did hear back from the 1A South also are in favor of keeping the cross-state semis. Again, looking for who the two best teams are in the state for that matchup, and that being the game that makes it to that point.
Thank you, Ms. Formaster. Mr. Larson.
Yeah, I think it's pretty obvious from what my coach put in on the public comment that we are definitely in favor of keeping that crossover. I take a look at I think almost every other team sport that we start the state tournament with a crossover game. I know other sports are a little different than football because of the travel, but is it truly a playoff? If we did, I mean, basically it's a championship game. There's no playoffs at that point if we're just going to go straight north and south. So we are definitely in favor of keeping the crossover in football 3A.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Mr. Jackson. Mr. Jackson, I don't know if you disappeared there. I know you were trying to unmute.
There we go. I get to be Debbie Downer, and I will be Debbie Downer. I have no problem being that right now. A couple of things I want to make sure the committee is fully aware of moving forward. One, this is the only sport we do this, correct, Bart?
Yep. In terms of the way the travel is set up. Mr. Larson's correct, where we have the cross semifinals.
We have
but
cross
we don't-
semifinals in the central site.
Right. We don't have the week in between.
Correct. I want to make sure that we fully are aware of that, which I know we all are. The board used this as one of its decision-making processes for rejecting a state football alignment that we proposed because they said the travel. And I know that was a different division and different region issue. And again, I'm not against any of this. I'm just trying to make sure we weigh all this out. Also, I have a serious concern with the perception and the implication of the site. One of the things we have strived to do is to provide our students the best opportunity for them to play at the best site. We literally uprooted the entire flag football postseason in 7 days because we'll do it. We said we'd do it, we did it, and it occurred, and I'm never going to say no to that because that's what we're going to do. But at the same time, the vitriol email and phone calls when we played 5A Division II and 2A football at McQueen, which was an incredible site, well-run, well-operated, great environment, that we weren't at Mackey Stadium. I think we need to be prepared for that, and I know that this group understands that. I know you understand that very well, but that is going to definitely limit our association's ability to secure facilities. It is also going to drive a situation that we have to be ready and prepared for, and we are, to understand that you may drive by a facility we could have secured if we would have been able to plan this out to the future. Just so you understand, with the limitations of rotation, north-south for state championships, and the limitations of not knowing who is going to participate in football particularly, those limitations are going to remain. And I just want to make sure I had that on the record. Now, whether this committee votes to go with status quo or move forward, we're in support. We understand that's what we'll do, and we'll do what we got to do. But I also want to make sure that when your community is impacted, that we remember we had this discussion, because I can't foresee a situation where we won't impact it. It will occur somewhere, because it has. But I also want to thank the schools that have always stepped up and said they'll host. Like right now, I guarantee I'm looking across the screen here and I'm like, well, I don't need to worry about it. I know Dallas is going to host that semifinal at Moapa, or Tammy's going to host it at Legacy, or Paul's going to host it at Fernley. It's not about the hosting sites. It's about what we make sure we're striving to do. And I appreciate that greatly. Now, from a financial end, on our end, you guys are our cheapest option for the most part. It doesn't cost us $30,000 to go play at West Wendover. It doesn't cost us that kind of money, and we're very appreciative of that. So I don't want you to think we don't want to do this. We just want to make sure that the communication and the information is shared out completely. And being Debbie Downer in this case was my job. So I'm done being Debbie Downer. I look forward to going to where did we go that year, Dallas, where I stood in the snow for the first time in 20 years? Where was that? Tahoe?
Truckee, I believe.
And I enjoyed it.
Probably Truckee, yeah.
It was Truckee. That's right. It was
Truckee.
Truckee, where I stood in the snow for the first time in 20 years and realized why I had moved away from the snow. So thank you guys. Appreciate it. I'm done.
Mr. Baldwin, then Ms. Habig. Mr. Baldwin, you may need to unmute.
There we go. So with logistics and planning, now that the 1A is now back to north-south rather than being 3 separate leagues or 4 separate leagues, could we look into maybe going to like what the 2A does, where the number 1 north host, the number 1 south host, and then that way that neutral site could be used for the state final, to kind of, that way you're not booking a neutral site for the semis and then having to turn around in 6 days or whatever it is to find a neutral site for the final. So just throwing that out there.
I think anything's a possibility, but I mean, again, depending on how the rotation will work out, I'm not sure, and I don't want to speak for the 1A, if the rotation would have the 1A, if we're fortunate enough to have Allegiant on a certain year,
Well,
the 1A would be there.
I believe next year 1A is slated to be in Reno or in the north, because of we were in Allegiant last year.
Yeah, we're in a little different rotation. I know, Mr. Jackson, you had that set up.
Yeah, we're waiting until, I have to wait until this is approved by the board. Once we have that, then we're going to put that full rotation in. And I don't want to commit until the board says yes, because the first time I did it, it was based on 5 divisions. Now it's going to be based on 6 divisions. So it's going to be a 4 in, 2 out type of rotation. But yeah, you're correct in that, Miles. We might be able, hopefully at the end of the board meeting in April, within a week or 2 after that, we're going to be able to send out to everyone, here's where we're going to go with slots for the next 3 years, who's hosting and who's hosting what. That's the goal.
Ms. Habig. And you may need to unmute also.
I lowered my hand and thought I unmuted.
You know what happens.
Mine's a quick comment, and then I think more of kind of a question. The comment, I think I understand where what Mr. Jackson's saying, where he was getting those emails and about the stadium. I think some people are forgetting. I know we played in that stadium the year before, and people have to remember you don't have access to as much at those stadiums as you do at a school. Couldn't use locker rooms, couldn't use a lot of stuff. So even though it was cool to play at the stadium, there were a lot of negatives to it as well. So that's just a quick comment for anybody who's never played at those stadium. Second thing, because I know this has gone back and forth, and I've sat through this meeting and then I sit through the Board of Control meeting. Is this that's on the screen what we talked about at the Board of Control meeting.
Yeah.
Yes, because that's what I'm worried about is that we're going to send
Well,
something up
yes
that's
and
not going to be.
Tammy, I'm going to say yes and no to that.
Yeah,
Let me put it this way. Xavier's in the room. X, you know that CCSD is looking to save costs on that crossover game because it costs them quite a bit of money. We understand that. So that's always been a discussion with the amount of money for CCSD with their travel. The other issue has always been securing the transportation necessary to get that travel done. Now, have they ever missed the game? No. Have they always gotten it done? Yes. But at the same time, I'm sure that would be one of the concerns. And that was brought up many times about the crossover game in the 3A specifically. With that being said, if that's a decision the board wants to go, the path the board goes down, that's the path the board goes down. Heck, they could tell us that we're only going to put 2 teams in the open division for football, and that's the way it's going to be, period. But they have not done that, so they always have that option because they're the board and they can pass or not pass whatever they see fit, and that's their role. So I don't think we're going to run into an issue, Tammy, where this is going to get thrown out with the baby in the bathwater. I don't think the baby's going to throw out with the bathwater. I think they're going to look at this. They're going to ask for the question, which Bart and I will be able to answer very honestly. What was the discussion? Why was the discussion had? And what was the feeling? X has his hand up. I'm glad I got to put him on the spot because I've had this conversation before. X.
Yeah, I think if you talk to anybody, especially in this office, the key is being proactive on where is that site going to be so that pre-planning can be done so that should some of the southern teams have to travel north, that hotel stays can be coordinated. Buses aren't getting any cheaper. But I just think that the cost isn't the concern. It's being able to be prepared to go to a certain location to be able to participate in those games.
Well, and I have also heard from, I'm not going to say a lot, it's been 1 or 2 people in the north, that some of the concern is some of those semifinal games have been played on Veterans Day weekend, which has then made it difficult to obtain rooms in Southern Nevada at a decent rate. It's the same reason that we don't play our state championship games on the weekend for football. The weekend before that Tuesday we play on Formula One's here, and the room rates are just astronomical for anybody coming down. Mr. Larson, you've got your hand up. I would ask you to unmute first, then lower the hand and go ahead and talk.
Yeah, I like to lower my hand after I talk. So
there you go.
Up. I think I've heard this phrase before, having adult problems and not kid problems on some of that stuff. And so and if the board wants to overrule this, that's fine. But my name will not be the 3A name that goes down for eliminating the crossover. That ain't going to happen for me.
Well, what I'm hearing, and again, I don't want to direct any motion one way or the other, but what I'm hearing here is our 1A, 2A, 3A people would like to keep that crossover semifinal. So if somebody would like to make a motion to approve the tournament formats as presented, with the exception that the 3A, 2A, and 1A would still have a north versus south, the 2 semifinals be crossover and then go to a championship. That would probably be wonderful if that's what this group wants. Mr. Polzian, you got your hand up there real quickly, sir.
In keeping with my proud 3A roots, I would like to make a motion that we keep the crossover games in the 1, 2, and 3A divisions, and then keep this proposal as presented with those modifications, please. Does that make sense?
Makes sense to me.
Great. It's all that matters, Bart.
I don't know about that. Mr. Polzian, thank you. Do we have a second?
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will second the Honorable Mr. CAA Tony Polzian's motion.
Wow, that's getting thick. Motion on the table for Mr. Polzian, a second from Mr. Larson to have what is proposed in front of us, with the exception that the 1A, 2A, 3A would be a cross-state semifinal still in football. Any further questions, comments, discussion? All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed? Okay. Girls golf. Mr. Jackson, I'm gonna pull you in on this one quick too. And I know some of our committee members who are also board members have heard this discussion several times at the board level, that they want a qualifying standard in place. I can tell you that in our April board meeting, where there will be a presentation for qualifying standards for who advances, because we've got some board members that don't like seeing scores of 180 or 200 or any of that stuff in a round of golf when we get there. You see the current tournament formats at the very top. There is a qualifying standard already in place in the South, as that is a 5A South only classification in girls golf for the past couple of years. Those qualifications, and Mr. Jackson, I don't know if you've got them in your email. I don't mean to put you on the spot, but Mr. Thornton, who is our golf coordinator in the South and also helps us out with the running of state tournaments in the South, had put some together as well. They were not astronomical, but basically if you weren't shooting somewhere in the ballpark of 110, 120, somewhere in there, you weren't advancing. Miss Habig, I know you've unmuted here real quick, and Mr. Thornton is also your golf coach, so you've got a pretty good relationship with him, I would imagine.
Yeah. We talked about it a lot. I think that basically it was double bogey. Like if you're not under double bogey golf is basically what they were looking at for qualifying standards. And I think that from what speaking with him, and I think majority of the coaches, I don't necessarily think it's like they want consistency throughout the state.
Right.
So that there's no, well, this is what the North wants, this is what the South wants, because we are clearly playing two different sets of standards. Down here we pick up after double par, and up there it was you play out every hole. And we did see 180 on the first day. So I think it was more of getting those qualifying standards in so that everyone was on the same page, basically.
I will tell you also, I know, Mr. Anthem, you've got your hand up. I'll get to you in just a second. The other thing that we deal with in golf, and this is part of the reason why we look at the qualifying standards, is we are not blessed with a great number of courses that open their doors to us and say, please come play on our course for the next 8 hours. The number of courses that we have available to us has dwindled. We are fortunate that in the South, we've had the Junior Golf Association help us out a little bit with accruing some sites for us. They also, the first year, helped us out a little bit in terms of making sure that there was a payment going back to the courses. The North has had a little bit less trouble historically getting courses, but that pendulum has started to swing now too, where they have fewer courses that they are able to access. Mr. Anthem, then Mr. Jackson.
And to compound on what Tammy stated, obviously state tournament, there was no limiting score. So if you shot a 20 on a hole, then you scored a 20. I think the other piece too is that the South, we do double par. In the North, they do circle 10. And I believe there should be a level of consistency amongst the North and the South to keep everything on par, as you can say.
Look at you being cute. Thank you, Mr. Anthem. Mr. Jackson, then Mr. Pearson.
Okay, don't get to be Debbie Downer here this time. I'm just going to make a statement. Here's what the statement is. After going through the first state tournament in golf as the executive director, having been on the job for 3 months, I will tell you I never want to go through that ever again. And I will tell you why. We had 4 tournaments with 4 different sets of rules and 40 sets of people who were upset by the different rules. No matter what we do from this point forward, we are going to have qualifying standards for golf. They don't have to be, I'm not saying that they are going to be, I'm not saying what they are at this point. I can't find Mr. Thornton's submission, Bart, I'm sorry, off the hand. The other thing is we are going to run our state tournaments by rules and standards that are approved by this organization, by the NIAA. We are not going to have it say, oh, we're in the South, so we're going to do that this year. We're in the North, we're going to do this year. We're in the East, we're in the West. No, we are going to set it up. And I want this body right now to say, for girls golf, we're going to have the standards that the board approves because they're coming to the board in April. We're going to utilize them across the board at all state tournaments. Because we need to have that standard in place so that we don't have the situations we had this fall with everybody coming from different places. So with that being said, whatever this body approves and goes to the board, whatever the board approves, the one stamp I want on it is consistency across the board. We play football by the same rules in 11-man, and they play football by the same rules in 8-man across the state of Nevada. Golf should be no different.
Mr. Pearson, then Ms. Habig.
Okay, just on the 3A side, north-south, I just want to make a comment now because it started with representation. You know, when we look at it starts with girls golf, but I totally understand qualifying score stuff. When we look at teams in here, and it's going to happen in multiple sports here down the road, the North's going to be heavier and almost double with the South. So we got to look at our representation of, which we've done in past years. I know I've coached wrestling all those years, and we've had different allotments, and it's not going to happen in those sports, but the team sports we got to look at also, which I know they have put in place, but that was basically off travel. So, but just something to note right now in the girls golf, we have 11 in the North and 6 in the South. So right now it's stated 3 and 3, which is not an equal representation of teams North to South. So I just want to state it now. So.
No, I appreciate that, Mr. Pearson. Again, what I've proposed here, and yes, I'll put my name on it. That's fine. People want to come after me, come after me. I do have a maximum of 3 teams on each side. It doesn't mean that necessarily all those spots would be filled based on the qualifying standards that we have set. And the region tournaments themselves, again, we're not dictating the region tournaments what they need to look like. They could also have those qualifying standards on top of it in terms of number of teams. Ms. Habig, Mr. Baldwin.
Mine's a question. Because I'm 1000% like, when it's time to make a motion, I'll make the motion that we add the qualifying standards. And my question is on the 5A, that's a big cut. I was just wondering why, because it's going from max 6 teams and 10 individuals to 3 teams.
It's actually, it's going from 6 and 10 in the South to 3 and 6 from each half of the state, which would be 6 teams and 12 individuals.
Okay, that's what I missed. Okay.
Yeah.
Because I was like, wow. Okay.
Yeah, that's it again. And not to say all spots are going to get filled either, but
no,
that's
of
the way it's
course,
set up.
of course.
Mr. Baldwin, then Mr. Polsey.
So one thing on the small school side of things, the 2A 1A combined league, you know, a lot of us can't get on courses or as early as say the South teams. Are the standards from 5A to 2A, is that qualifying standard going to be the same? What is our magic number per league, I guess is the question.
And I don't hold me to this because I'm going off memory, and as we've seen through these meetings, my memory is awful. I do believe when we talked with Mr. Thornton about this, we were looking at I want to say that lower number was a 100 or a 105 for an individual at the 5A level. That team score would be 4 times that. And then as we moved from level to level, 5A to 4A to 3A to 2A, that qualifying score increased either by 5 or 10 strokes per person on the average.
And then one other, thank you. And then one other thing, talking with my principal, Bob Woolsey, who was kind of the 2A Zara golf for
forever. Yes.
One thing he thought, and like we're looking at this max of 3 teams. So say a team had a score of 75, 78, 79, and then the 4th golfer shoots a 120. And if the cutoff is 115, you know, my understanding is that team would not qualify because max qualifying.
That team would qualify under the qualifying score for the team. They would.
So maybe in the 2A, and obviously here in Mr. Jackson's side of things with different, you know, I totally understand that. But if a team qualifies, at least maybe in the 2A, we go away from max of 3 and just the 3 teams qualify, that 4th individual gets to go. Because we do have a tough time filling teams. sometimes in that two-way side.
If the team were to qualify, the 4 individuals were to go, what I know Mr. Thornton had looked at is the possibility of, let's say you had 6 individuals on your team.
And
your team
that's
scores-
where, so our kid that golfs right near the cutoff, that they go as part of the 4th member of the team, but our kid that golfs a 185.
Yes, that
she
was
can
the,
stay home. Yeah.
that was the part of the discussion, because that kid was not going to have an effect on the team
Right.
score.
Right.
And
that's, that I think everybody'd be in agreement on that.
Yeah, and I hate to say that kid was the one shooting the 6-hour round, because we've all been out there and seen the kid shoot 82 that lines up every putt for 5 minutes and shoots a 6-hour round as well. That's another thing. Pace of play is a whole other argument.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. Mr. Art Anderson.
Thank you, Art Anderson, 4858 North. The qualifying standard, we're moving to it, and we have it in swim. We're moving to it in track and field. It only makes sense to do it in golf as well, especially to speed up the play rate. Ultimately, going back to cross country, is it something that should be looked at for cross country? Is a qualifying standard, which would have helped the original argument for those teams being removed in cross country. But I'm all for qualifying standard.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Mr. Polzin. Got to unmute, Mr. Polzin.
It's my first day. To Wade's point with the representation 11 and 6, I would say that these Southern wrestling coaches have been arguing that for years, that the majority of these Southern wrestling teams should have more representation in the state. So I don't want to get into that discussion too much. My concern, though, with these standards, and though for those of you that are familiar with 4A's golf, is would we have enough girls in the South that would actually qualify? Because it's a pretty low level of golf for those of you that have seen it over the last couple of years. So I would just hope whatever that number is, and I agree, we don't want anybody out there for, 100 should be the number, if you want me to be honest. But I think we just got to be careful where we set that number so that we do create a viable postseason event.
Yeah, and Mr. Polzin, I don't disagree with your comments. That's something the South has kind of regulated on its own, actually, the past couple of years, with having some qualifying standards where in the one case where they had the availability to take 3 teams to state, they took 1 instead, because the others just weren't going to be anywhere near competitive. That was not a decision our office made. It was something the South made on its own. But yeah, as we discussed when we were talking about where to place the northern schools, 5A or 4A, there's a big drop off between that 5A and 4A golf in the South for sure. Any questions or comments or other discussion here? If not, we'd be looking for a motion to entertain and approve a tournament format for girls golf going forward. Ms. Habig.
I'll make the motion. So I'll make the motion that we approve the proposed girls golf tournament format, with the caveat that there will be qualifying standards that are decided upon in the April Board of Control meeting.
We have a motion on the table from Ms. Habig. Do we have a second?
Art Anderson, 4858 North. I make a second.
Motion from Ms. Habig, a second from Mr. Art Anderson to accept the proposed girls golf tournament format as listed on page 26 of our packet, pending the qualifying standards to be determined by our Board of Control in its April meeting. Any further questions, comments, discussion? All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please unmute and indicate by saying nay. We have girls golf at the bank. We're already past last time's meeting, but that's okay. Boys soccer. What we currently have is top 2 in the North, top 2 in the South. They come together either in the North or the South for a 2-day tournament, crossover semifinals. You see the rest of it. I don't need to read it all to you. This is something where you see the proposed 4A. If we stay with 4 leagues, that's something that Mr. Anthium, as we give that freedom to our league schedulers, we just want to make sure that we kind of have a number in mind. Because if that league number changes to 5 or to 6, we don't necessarily want that to become a 20 or 24 team bracket. This is also the point in the conversation here where I need to pull in our 3A and 2A Northern people in regards to soccer and kind of a final decision here on what we want to do. Mr. Cottrell, you've been a driving force behind this. I know Mr. Brooks has been involved to a certain extent. You've gone through and done another survey, and as we look at the boys soccer and girls soccer in the north, let's talk about a split. Do your schools in the north support the idea of having that 3A, 2A split?
Yeah, so what I did is I sent out a survey asking each 2A, 3A school what level of soccer they would want to play at, 3A, 2A. It came back with 6 schools in the boys that wanted to play 2A, 6 schools in the girls that wanted to play 2A. And having talked with those 2A schools, they were very excited that they would be playing a more competitive schedule. I know last year there were a few schools that wound up not making it through the full season because the games were just out of control, no matter what was done to prevent from a blowout. So what we would like to do is go ahead and go with that 3A, 2A split. We've talked about Michelle Nichols, the Elko athletic director, is working on a schedule where for those 2A schools, we would be looking at the 3A JV teams filling in for non-league games to help give them a more full schedule. And then obviously with the 3A schools, I can't remember the exact number. I think it was 12 in the boys and 13 in the girls, or 11 in the boys and 12 in the girls. But that's what we would like to do.
That's something we've supported on our end. Mr. Jackson, I don't know if you want to speak on this also. That was part of the genesis behind changing the portion of the NAC that said we needed 9 teams for a state tournament, is when we looked at soccer, which there was a real disparity in the haves and the have-nots. And some of those teams were traveling hours to go play a game that they were either winning or losing 20-0.
Bart, you know my feelings on this. I've never hidden from the fact that I don't care who you play in the regular season, makes me no difference at all. But if we have enough teams that can play a divisional state championship, we should play it. And I think this is good for kids. And we talk about, we've heard the comment more than once today. Oh, we give them something to work towards. Well, I think in this situation, a school that's been through this, that 17-0, the 21-0, knowing, hey, you know what, there is hope at the end of the tunnel. We are going to have a shot. Regular season is just going to be regular season, but we can play like schools in the postseason. I'm a big fan for this. I'm in support of a 2A soccer state championship.
Thank you, Mr. Jackson. That would lead to the proposed formats that we have there. As Mr. Cottrell said, I believe it was 6 schools that you had that were wanting to go to the 2A, that would pull out of the 3A. What that would leave us with on a quick count is, I think, 11, if they all play in boys soccer. And Wattel's always on the fence as to whether or not they're going to have boys soccer. It would leave us with, I believe it's 10 in the South in the 3A. The 5A split would be 12 and 11. 4A is obviously South only. So you see the proposed format on page, whatever page we're on, 27th. Any other comments, questions, discussion from our committee? If not, we would be looking for a motion to approve or come up with some sort of tournament format, either the one in front of you or something else you've got in mind.
Rob Cottrell, 3A North. I would like to make a motion to approve the boys girls soccer as presented on the screen.
We get to have boys up right now. Do you want to do both boys and girls? Just want to make sure.
I'll do both boys and girls.
Okay. so that everybody knows there is the girls soccer format as well. And there's a little bit of difference in this, in that the 4A girls soccer, it does include the North. The 5A is a standalone. And there we would have the top 2 North and top 2 South, and 1 North and 3 South. Do we have a second on Mr. Cottrell's motion before I get to Mr. Anthony?
Mike Brooks, 2A North. I'll second that.
Thank you, Mr. Brooks. Motion for Mr. Cottrell, second Mr. Brooks, to accept the proposed alignments for boys and girls soccer. Mr. Anthium, I know you have your hand up, and then Mr. Magrum.
Thanks, Bart. Looking at the 4A girls soccer, I know right now, as I see proposed, it has a top 2 North, top 2 South when it's in the North, and the top 1 North and the top 3 South when it's in the South. I did a little bit of research, and so I'm going to share with everybody. I guess my brain operates in 2 ways, or I had 2 ways of thinking. One is, I would agree, because you know what? In 4A girls soccer, you've got a fair amount of teams, specifically 30 teams that are in the 4A South to 11. So when you do the math, the breakup would seem appropriate to have it as a 1-3 when it comes down south. But then I looked in the other side of my brain, and what I did is I looked at competitiveness. And when I look at the girls soccer 4A, I see that the last 2 years we've had South versus North in the state championships. The South winning one and the North winning the other. So my opinion, again, I'm just a consultant or liaison, however you want to put me, but I think maybe you need to go top 2 North, top 2 South, whether it's in North or in the South. Just my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Magrum, then Mr. Pearson.
Sorry, computer issues there. Mine kind of somewhat along those lines, and I thought it was maybe too big of a change, so I want to bring something up to maybe kind of look at over this 3-year cycle. I know in talking to some coaches, in the North specifically, but kind of in general with soccer and the way the postseason goes, playing those 2 games back to back and kind of the physicality in those high level games has been a little rough to go back to back days like that. And I know a lot of coaches would love to have a day off in between, and I understand why, from the school district's perspectives, why that would be extremely difficult to do. So I know there's maybe some coaches that had thought about even just getting down to kind of a northern champ, a southern champ, and playing a championship game there. I know there's been times when we might have, an all southern or all northern final in some of these sports. So maybe over those 3 years, just something to look at would be, in the situations when that happens, is there any change from that regional champion to who wins in a state championship, or are we just rehashing out the same game that already occurred and we could just play kind of a single, state championship game based on the northern and southern champs, like we're doing in the upper levels in football?
Mr. Magrum is another one of those people who reads my mind from time to time. Thank you, Mr. Magrum. Mr. Pearson.
Yeah, I'm just going through with the numbers in the boys and girls with our soccer. I just want to touch on it again. I talked about earlier with the representation, but obviously boys soccer, when we look at those teams that will go down, is 11, 10. That's right on, spot on. But when you look at the girls side of things and representation, with what I have, and I don't know which teams will fill teams. Number wise, it's 15 teams in the North and 8 in the South. And we're looking at a 2-2. I just want to kind of look at this and keep this established all the way through and be consistent with other sports, especially in our 3A, because that's where there's a noticeable discrepancy between total teams, where there again we almost have twice as many, and we're going to go with a 2-2, and we're going to have to maybe look at this stuff down the road in all the other sports also. And like I said, though, I don't know the context of the teams on the girls' side of how many are actually going to have those teams or what, because sometimes we don't know until we start the season. But I know other sports is pretty clear.
Yeah, and that's obviously that's true both North and South too. We don't know on some of these. Yeah, I mean, I could go either way on that one as well. Mr. Cottrell, you've got your hand back up.
Yes, on the survey I sent out, I believe we had 13 3A playing schools for girls soccer.
And again, Wattel's one of those that you never know till you
Right.
know.
And
Yeah.
having talked with their athletic director down at the NATA conference, they were very excited about this, and they assured me that they would have both boys and girls if they were playing two-way.
Okay, let's hope.
Yeah.
Mr. Larson.
I'm sorry. The girls we're gonna have a two-way soccer as well as the boys, correct?
Correct.
So if you take out the two-way, if the two-way does have that, how many girls teams are there in the north for 3A, Rob?
I had 13 schools that were going to play 3A and 6 girl schools that were going to play 2A.
So 13 to 8 and 8 in the south. Okay. Thank you.
Okay, we've got the motion and the second on the table to approve the proposed formats in boys and girls soccer. Any further question or discussion? Okay. All in favor of that motion, if you would please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, if you would please unmute and indicate by saying nay. Okay, boys and girls soccer has been approved to go forward to the board. Tennis, and I've talked this over with Mr. Gourier, our tournament director in the South. You see what we currently have for tennis up there at the top, what we are proposing. Part of the reason that gets shrunk in the 5A a little bit is there are only 7 teams in the 5A. So if we took everybody's starting lineup, filled all 9, you could only have 21 slots in the individual bracket in both singles and doubles. As we look again, the numbers in tennis, we're looking at from the 4A side of things, I believe that's 11 in the north, and that worked out to be 30 in the south. Again, assuming everybody's got a team, that's the magic thing here. And we look at the 3A, that split was actually 8 and 8. So what you see, pretty much what you get. We've gone in the past. I know we've done some situations where we've had a 3 and 1 for teams and still kept the 4 and 4 individuals, which actually is a benefit when it comes to the region tournament. If you go deeper than 4 advancing to state, now you're having backdraw quarterfinals as well, which creates a lot of matches on very limited courts. So questions, comments, thoughts, discussion here. Mr. Anthiam.
All right, kind of like I talked about girls soccer, tennis as well. I did talk with Kai, who's obviously our coordinator for the North and the South, and he had the same sentiment where it might be an idea to continue with the top 2 North, top 2 South, whether it's in the North or the South.
Can certainly see that too. When you look at a competitive scale, there are 30 teams in the South, but they're not all going to be in the hunt for a championship for sure. Mr. Cottrell, I don't know if you've got your hand up for this or if it's just.
No.
Okay. Any other comments or questions here? If not, we would entertain a motion. I'm sorry.
Just what?
Yeah,
one
Mr. Anderson.
Along with what X just said, we've because of the difference in the amount of teams, I completely understand why we have the 4A format that we do for state tournament, where it's 3 teams from the South, 1 team from the North when it goes to the South. My only comment is, I mean, if it's for competitive balance, would 2 and 2 make sense for tennis? I would like to hear from the South if that's even an option, because I understand we have way fewer teams when we go to the 4A in a sport than we do when we're competitive in the 5A. So I would like to just hear if that's an option, or if it would just be, I don't want to pit North versus South just based on the fact because there's so many schools. All right.
And I will tell you from my end, before we ask for our Southern representatives here, I don't see why it wouldn't be an option. Let's put it that way. I think we could come up with whatever we need to come up with there, but I will open it up to any of our our 4A, 5A Southern representatives here and get their thoughts on it.
Tony, 4A, 5A South. I kind of agree with Art here. Like the 2-2, I think makes for a better competitive state tournament. I mean, I think if you look at what happened in girls basketball this year, you know, we got in as the 3 and played the 1 from the north, and it wasn't a close game. And I think in 4A, you're going to see that in a lot of sports where there's 4A is weird. It's like we have 5A, 4A, and then there's 4 or 5 schools that are like 4A and a half. You know, they kind of fall in the middle and don't really fit into either wheelhouse. But I think for competitive purposes, I think it's better 2-2. I think the CCSD athletic office wouldn't like that for travel expenses, but you know, like they were saying, heck, if I got to figure out a way to get my tennis team up there, I'll figure out a way to get my tennis team up there. That's my 2 cents.
Thank you, Mr. Polsey. We could always put Mr. Anthium on the spot on that comment
Yeah,
about
I have
the
no
budget.
problem jumping in. I again just quickly kind of glancing at results and whatnot. I mean, looking at this past year, 3 of the top 4 teams, I'm going boys and girls, were northern teams. Going further back, I mean, again, very briefly, the North is competitive. Even though, like Bart said, even though we have more teams, not all of our 4A teams have a team. They might have a few athletes that are playing tennis. I'm not trying to put any specific schools on blast, but it's the number of teams. It appears to be a lot, but when it comes to going to the state playoffs, I think 2-2 is appropriate, going both up north and down south.
Yeah, Tony, sorry, just to jump in, and I agree completely with X. A lot of those 4A tennis matches down here, if you go see, are over in 45 minutes because, you know, we have some 4A member schools that will roll in here with 3, 4, 5 kids total. So just don't let the number of schools scare you. I mean, that, you know, the amount of those that actually have full scoring squads is certainly not what it appears to be on paper.
I agree. As the other 4A, one of the other 4A representatives, 4A, 5A reps, I completely agree. Because we've been in 4A and 3A, and it was amazing to me the difference that 3A had 20 some kids on their team, and majority of the time we were in 4A, it was a double forfeit.
What I'm hearing, and again, I'm not trying to lead any motions, but if somebody would like to make one that goes with the proposed format, with the exception of it would be the top 2 North and top 2 South teams, regardless of where the tournament is held. We could certainly do that. Mr. Larson, your hand's up.
Yeah, I'll make the motion to have 5A, the top 6 teams with 21 slot individual bracket. The 4A, with the top 2 from the north, top 2 from the south. The top 4 individuals on each side, regardless of tournament site. And then the 3A, the top 2 teams, 4 slots per draw in each half of the state.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. We have a motion. Do we have a second?
I will second that motion, Tony, 4A, 5A South.
Motion for Mr. Larson, a second for Mr. Polzian to follow the proposed format that is on page, I forget, 29 of our packet, with the exception of the teams in the 4A would be 2-2, regardless of where the tournament is held. Any further discussion, comments, questions? All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please unmute and indicate by saying nay. On we go to girls volleyball. You see the current format at the top, the proposed format. So you look at the 5A, that's 11 teams in the north and now 10 in the south, with Palo Verde's appeal being granted today. The 4A is a south only, and we depend on the number of teams number of leagues we stay with. 3A is a 12-7 split as of right now. There you see for the 3A for the proposed, I do have 3 teams in the north and 1 in the south, and the tournament is north to kind of even that out. 2-2 when it's south. 2A, we just stay with where they are at, 2 teams from each. And the 1A, we did have split up into 4 leagues. Here's a discussion for the 1A on this as we lengthen things. The state tournament formats, Mr. Jackson, please chime in on this if you would too. In volleyball and in basketball, in the 1A, we have an 8-team format. What that has led to is a state quarterfinal round on a Thursday, semifinals on a Friday, and a championship on a Saturday. I've had conversations with Mr. Vick about this as well, and I don't know if he's unable or if he is able to unmute. But we had talked about the possibility of sliding those quarterfinals into neutral sites the weekend before. The reason behind that, it does create issues for us when we are trying to get high school venues. This year, we had to split up the 1A basketball, for instance, into 2 separate sites the day before, and came pretty close to running up against a time when kids were still being let out of school. Mr. Jackson, I don't know if you had any thoughts on this you wanted to share.
And it comes back down to the other thing, Bart. I mean, the cost of travel, it's an extra day out of school. And if we can get that game played on the Saturday prior and get to the state tournament with just the 4 like we've had with the other divisions, it would be very great. We'd be very grateful. It would make for a smoother state championship week. We would have one less venue if we don't have a centralized venue, or one less day in a venue that we would have to use, and it would make it a little bit easier for us. Not that that's the only reason to do things, as like Dallas likes to point out, that's an adult problem. But if we can get that match on a Saturday, head into the state championship week with 4-4-4-4 across all our divisions, I think we'd be in a better place and could offer a better experience for all of our kids.
And Mr. Jackson brought up the school end of things as well. We've got teams leaving on a Wednesday now to come play in the state tournament, where if they could meet on a Saturday, and again, I don't want to even guess on travel for some of these schools, but if they could come day of, leave day of on a Saturday, they're not missing school that day. It's one less day out of school total. Mr. Baldwin, your hand is up.
So I'll probably circle around on this a few different times, but with this, we basically essentially moved the quarterfinals up to where regional tournaments that weekend. So then are we going to slide our regional tournaments up, or is this because a lot of people don't want to lose that regional tournament.
No, you would still keep the regional tournament.
So we would
yes.
then slide our regional tournaments up a weekend.
Correct.
So state would go over 2 weekends.
Correct.
Essentially.
That's what Mr. Vick and I had talked about. We started talking about this even back at state volleyball this year.
Gotcha. With that, the only thing, so like it says Winnemucca East versus West, are we rotating those, or will that we get to a disproportionate when it's always the North and always the South? From the North's end of things, I believe it's 22 teams compared to the South has something like 14. And you'd have 2 and 2 out of those, so it just seems disproportionate. If we rotate, I know I'd be in favor kind of the way it used to be with the crossover regionals, sort of, or how it's been, where we rotate. East will play the Central this year, and then we'll play the South the following year. I think if we rotate, I think we'd all be in favor of that.
Yeah, the magical mark there is the question mark at the end of that, where it was just me throwing out Winnemucca East versus West and Beatty for Central versus South, both from a location standpoint, and also that wouldn't necessarily be the matchup. I do know that it's slightly more convenient, let's say, for the Central to get to the West or the South than it might be necessarily for the South to get to the East, for instance. But we could certainly work on a rotation format. We've had it in the past. I don't see why we couldn't do it here. Mr. Vick.
Yes, I don't know how to raise your hand, but we definitely don't want to lose the regional tournament. Expenses are going to be expenses. My question is, if we meet somewhere, would you have to play it out, or would the one play the two, and would it be a one-day thing?
The way that, and you and I discussed this before about this, is we look at volleyball, for instance. What we would do, you would play your region tournament. We would have 4 different regions that would each have 2 teams. Let's say the West and the East were going to meet to have that quarterfinal. The West's one would play the East 2. The East one would play the West 2. Those 2 winners advance to state. The other site, the South's one would play the Central 2. The Central one would play the South 2. Those 2 winners join the 2 winners from the East-West, into a 4-team state tournament.
So it would just be a 1-game thing,
Correct.
correct?
Yeah.
I agree with Miles that it, when we talk about travel and stuff, for us, it's the same no matter where you go. If we had to go to Elko to play, it would be no difference than us going to Indian Springs to play. The mileage is the same. The only downside of this, if it has the potential to add more expense to us, if you get into more than having to go for more than 1 day.
Yeah, and I don't foresee it would need to do that. When we talk about basketball, obviously we're talking about boys and girls together, so that we'd be looking at 4 games at a site as opposed to 2 games at a site. But I think if we had the 2 separate neutral sites, you could set up those game times for whatever's convenient for those schools coming in, as long as we have somebody that's kind of, let's call it equidistant, or as equidistant as we can get between the 2 regions that's willing to host. And that's obviously another X factor in its own.
I understand where the position is on these things. My personal feeling is I like it as it is, but I also understand where everyone is coming from.
I know our Ms. Formaster, I think you're still here. I know Mr. Katz, I don't believe, made it today. Ms. Formaster, I don't know if you had any thoughts on this you wanted to share.
I mean, I miss with Mr. Vick on the idea that, you know, it's worked the way it's been. But as he said, I also understand, you know, there's got to be some compromise in areas and looking at all of the things that affect everybody. So, you know, I don't really have anything different than what Dave just said.
So one more thing on it is, if we have to back everything up, we will just do that. But like, our volleyball schedules are all set and made, so we'll basically be throwing that out and starting again, which everybody knows that can be done, just as a headache. But
yeah. Mr. Jackson, anything you want to follow up with on this? Caught you at the right time in the coughing spell.
Sorry. No, I leave this to the decision of the group. I think all sides are valid in this one. You know, I don't have a feeling one way or the other. Would I like it to be easier on the back end of state? Yes. Do I understand the front end of regionals? 100%. Do not want to lose those regionals. Moving this one has a domino effect no matter which way we go. And I appreciate that. And you know as well as I do, Bart, we'll propose, but we don't live and die with our proposals. It's just an idea. If this group says, nope, forget it, we hate it, or yes, we love it, or we can adjust it, whatever the case may be.
You've seen it happen today, Mr. Jackson. I'm close to batting 500 today, I think.
And better than most of the Yankees.
Oh, don't even. Mr. Larson, you got your hand up.
Yeah, I said this during the cross country, and I'll kind of reiterate it. I believe in the, you know, the more kids that have a chance to say they went to state, the better. Coming from state that, you know, has 16 team tournaments for all their sports to Nevada was a shock for me to only have 4. I know that talking in Moapa, they're like, we used to have the 3, used to have 18 state tournaments. I have my coaches still. Why can't we have, you know, a bigger state tournament and actually feel like a tournament rather than just 4? But I'm envious of the 1A. I would love the 3A to be able to have kind of that same opportunity. And if that would help with venues to have another league join them and having a 3-day, then the 3A would definitely help the 1A if that helps secure venues.
Can I make a comment real quick?
Please.
Dallas, the only thing that will help us secure venues is we get out of the notion we have to flip north and south every year. If we could have, as a state, get out of that, and I'm going to go off on a tangent here on this one because it's a great segue. If we could get off of the belief that it has to go north and south every year, it wouldn't matter if it was a 1-day tournament, a 2-day tournament, or an 8-day tournament. We could secure venues for years. But the minute I say this, watch your eyebrows in your screen. What if we just tell you right now, basketball will be in the north for the next 3 years? You're holding them. You're
And that
holding
would,
them.
and that would mean that we could have a 8-team state tournament if it was
It
always.
means we
north
could look
for the
at
next-
more options. We don't have, I'll give you an example. This is a great example. We can't use the Orleans. They would love to have the NIAA basketball tournament at the Orleans. They enjoyed us. We were great. We bring a good crowd and we stay in their hotel and we eat at their restaurants and we impact their financial end. But if we can't guarantee them 2 or 3 or 5 years in a row of coming back, we lose out to a cheerleading competition. That's why we're not there. They would have loved to have had us, but we couldn't go because we can't commit. We have to learn to commit. We're a bad boyfriend. And what we really need is we have to get away from it has to go north and south. I don't know how long you've been in the state, Dallas, but there's enough old guys on here like me. I remember football was always in Sam Boyd and basketball was always at Lawler. And you might have had 2 northern teams in football in the south, and you might have had 2 southern teams in basketball in the north, and the crowd was small. But if we could commit, we might be able to get a more developed state championship. And not that I'm saying we can go to 8. I'm not saying that right now, but I'm saying that's one of the biggest hurdles we're facing in our office.
I'm just, if I know, well, it would surprise me if coaches would not be okay, because I was here when the basketball was always in the Lawler. And I know when I came in at West Wendover, I remember watching the 3As and they had their 8-team state tournament back then. And I know we had consolation brackets coming through and it was felt like a tournament. And I felt like people could come and know that they were going to be there for more than just one night. Even if we lose the first night, we're there for the second night. To me, that is a state tournament that I can't see why there could, I don't know. Maybe there's someone else that will say a reason why, but that to me, if it's always in the north for basketball like that, and we get the 8 teams or more or a 3-day tournament, I would love that.
Oh, the can of worms that's just been opened.
I'm all about that. I know we need to open that can. We need to kick that can and spew those worms all over the place.
Mr. Art Anderson, then Mr. Baldwin.
And I will try to Art Anderson 4A5A North. I'll try to be very quick. But I agree with what Mr. Jackson's saying. And if it was something that this committee could do, I mean, the next meeting that we have, it's something that we should look at or at least propose to the board, because wrestling being in either Fallon or Winnemucca makes so much more sense with the fact that we get the venues for free than any place else that it can take place in the state. And so if we had to compromise other sports going south versus some of them going north, it only makes sense to me. So just one person.
Mr. Baldwin.
Myself, speaking for the 1A East, the 1A North, and probably even a little bit of the 2A East and the 3A East. Whether it's in wherever it's rotated to, we have to travel regardless, this whole side of the state. So this whole third of the state will not be affected by permanent sites like that. I think it'd be amazing, personally, just adding that.
Thank you,
Baldwin. Mr. Baldwin, you're not going to build the big arena there in Wells?
I'm working on it. I'm working on it. Give me 75 years, we'll get there.
Is that all? All right. So getting back to where we are at girls volleyball and trying not to consider the quote of "we're a bad boyfriend." We've got the proposed format up there. We've had the discussion from the 1A that maybe they don't want to go to the extra weekend right now. So at some point here, we're going to need a motion for how we want to go forward. But first, Mr. Anthium, you've got your hand up.
Yeah, I kind of wanted to wait until the 1A discussion was complete. And then, now that the can of worms have also gone to another direction. Cool. My statement is specific to 3A volleyball. Again, going back and again looking at results and whatnot, 3A girls volleyball, the South has won the last 3 years. They've won 8 out of the last 10 championships. I think we're doing a disservice if we go 3-1 when the state championship is in the North. I would like to see the proposal amended specifically for 3A to be 2-2.
Okay, Mr. Odegaard.
Mr. Anthium beat me to the punch. That was what my comment was going to be as well. I mean, I know there's a little bit of a difference, but it's 11-7 from what I can see. I mean, that's not drastic. And if we look at, not only has the state won several of the last volleyball championships, but the last 3 or 4 have been South only in the championship game.
Mr. Pearson.
Yep, I'm gonna help open up the can again because let's expand the bracket. I agree upon the 2-2. I go 6. 3-3. Let's get a good bracket going and make it a good feel, and actually play the 3rd place game because everybody's going down. Because speaking of travel, everybody's worried about travel. We go down, and it's going to come up in basketball. Hey, our teams have traveled down there many years to Vegas or even to Reno, and band and our cheerleaders, and we get one and done. And why not play a game? Because we're just at a gymnasium when we can play that 3rd place game. Just, to me, make it meaningful, make it an experience for the kids, and going that route sometimes doesn't do it for us. And we're not afraid to travel. So
Until Spring Creek builds that arena, 7,000 to host basketball. Wow, we got a lot on the table here. Mr. Larson.
Just Tim or Bart, when is the best time, or when can we discuss having a bigger tournament format at some point? I mean, I know it gets brought up a lot, and I understand, I always tell my, well, I don't know, it's kind of a school district thing, but is this the right time to ask for that?
No, I don't think this is the right time at Dallas. I think what we need to do is get through this alignment, and then as we move forward, we can look at that. I think what needs to occur is this. Right now, the calendar is set for this year, and we're working on next year. Not that I'm saying we can't make a change. What I'm saying is this: if we want to go to something that's expanded in that sense, we've got to budget that out. We have our budget for this year, and we're looking at our budgets for next year. We've got to figure out what we can as an association afford, what we as an association can do. Now, that being said, the other thing we've got to do is we're going to have that discussion with the board about changing the calendar moving forward, taking that little N or that little S off the state championship calendar, because that's how we do the rotation, the North and South. And hopefully we can get to the point where the board either directs or we go out and do it on our own, which I'm trying to do right now, and find these venues and say, are you willing to work with us for more than 1 year? And if you are, I will tell you one of the things I do, Dallas, and it's heads on pillows. When I think of Allegiant football, and we're sending 4 teams into Allegiant when we have Allegiant, and hopefully we continue to have Allegiant, what is the average number of kids that are putting a head on a pillow when we play in Allegiant? And if it's 4 northern teams or an east team, those kids have to put their heads on pillows. When we go to the north, what would be comparable? So, for example, with wrestling, which we just went through, I'm looking at the schools that came from the south up and from outside areas who had to put their heads on pillows. What is comparable to that? I was shocked to see that Washoe actually had their kids stay out of town. They took up some of the hotel rooms, but those are kids with heads on pillows. So that way, we're trying to disperse it across the state equitably. So that would take a little work to get done. And then if you add another layer to that, it adds another layer to that development. So that's not something we can say, hey, in April, we're going to come up with this new format for all of our state championships to go to 8. The other thing we're going to have to look at, Dallas, is when you talk about that 3rd place game, you got to remember those 3rd place games probably occurred when there were 3 divisions of basketball, and the number of games was reduced down. But I'm not saying it's something we can't look at, but that's something we would have to look at. It can't be hey, we're going to do this tomorrow and this is how it's going to work. It's going to be incremental. I mean, I will tell you that the financial impact for Fallon with the wrestling was good. It was very good from what they reported back to us. And our gate was very good. So it's a venue that was free, that we had great crowds for, but there was also some concerns about the size of the crowd and any of the travel issues if we continued it. So I want to look at all of those things, and all those things are on the table as we develop this further. So
Okay.
until they build the Jason Odegaard Stadium in Pahrump and build a 500-room hotel next to it, we may be looking at incrementally doing this across multiple sports over multiple years.
Because I've had conversations with both North and Southern people about, you know, this discrepancy between North and South, and maybe having a two from the South, 2 from Northwest, 2 from Northeast. So it becomes more equitable. So that basically 4 from the North, 2 from the South overall, which I think the South would be happy if we qualify 2. But I've also talked to coaches that they'd be okay if the state tournament was bigger, if region, you know, just take the 4 regular season, and those are the 4 that get to go to state. So if that takes away its cost from the NIAA for region, then we can add to this, you know, use for bigger state. I'm sure you would have a lot of, I don't know. I feel like you'd have a lot of people agree that would support that if that helps.
And I tell you, I know Washoe would be very happy if we didn't have anything in the South the weekend of EDC.
Yes.
I mean, they would be extremely happy if we did that. And they would also be very happy if we didn't have anything the weekend of F1. You know, as Vegas continues to draw major sporting events, and let's be honest, we all know it's coming, NBA's next. And when the NBA gets into town, we may be looking at reductions there as well. So we need to be more amenable. And so that you guys are all aware, and I'd go over this with the board, you know, I'm having conversations with Nevada, looking to have a conversation with the Tahoe Event Center. Got a connection now with the Reno Tahoe Convention Authority. So we're working on developing those relationships. And thank you to Sunrise Mountain staff, who has now got me a different connection with Lee's Family Forum down there. So we're going to continue to have those conversations. But at the end of the day, I would say 90% of our hurdle to get over is we are so single season, single event, not committed to more than 1 year. And we need to get to a multi-year commitment, and then we can look at developing. So that's where we're going, and that's what we'll continue to do.
Just to follow up a little bit on the third place games and bigger tournaments, both 2 things. One, if you look at the basketball tournament that recently concluded at Cox Pavilion, we wouldn't have been able to wedge 10 third place games into there. It just wasn't going to happen. Secondly, as we look at a bigger state tournament, Mr. Jackson, you can get on this more than any of us can. You're going to hear it from the superintendents, I would assume, when you meet with them about if we go to a bigger tournament, more missed school time as well. Now, I'm not saying that's the determining factor. It's just a whole bunch of dominoes in one big pile. So
yes, and Dallas, I'm sorry, I don't see Dallas's face on my screen. Bart, that's a great segue. That's a great segue in there. I mean, meeting with the superintendents again this month to go over again what the financial status of the NIAA is and why we needed the dues increase so badly and where we are with that. So that's always in there. And number one, I always follow the standing committees that the superintendent meetings have. And they're all, no offense to our group, because I think we are the best educational based entity in the state of Nevada, highest graduation rate of any demographic, is class time, classroom instruction, teacher on task with kids. And now let's talk about athletics. And you want to take them out of all these things, and that we got to be very careful, tread very lightly there.
okay, so this train took us a whole lot of places, but we need to get back on girls volleyball. We need to have some sort of motion, some sort of proposal here going forward for what we want to do for state tournaments for girls volleyball. Does anybody want to try to take a stab at that? I will put out something that maybe will help. If we see what's on the screen on page, whatever the heck it is, 30, thank you. I think we were pretty good with the 5A. The 4A, again, that's something Mr. Anthium and I have discussed regarding number of teams and leagues. We've obviously got the Palo appeal that, has a slight effect on this. The 3A, I've heard both the 3-1 and the 2-2, given based on numbers or based on competitive balance, however you want to look at it. 2A, I think we were pretty good with where we were at with 2-2. 1A, from what we heard from our 1A people, I think they wanted to keep it at 8. Mr. Larson, your hand is up.
Yeah, I'll go ahead and give a stab at this proposal here. I make the motion that the 5A is the top 2 teams from each half of the state into crossover semifinals. The 4A, if staying with 5 leagues, the top 3 teams in each league into a 15-team field, 1 alternating team draws by. The 3A, the top 2 teams from each half of the state into a crossover semifinal. The 2A, the top 2 teams from each half of the state into crossover semifinals, and the 1A, top 2 teams from each of 4 leagues into crossover quarterfinals.
Motion on the table for Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Tony Polsey, 45A South. I'll second it.
Motion for Mr. Larson, second by Mr. Polsey. Not even going to try. But we heard it very clearly from Mr. Larson. Thank you. Any further questions, comments, discussion? Mr. Baldwin.
So this is keeping the quarterfinal game on Thursday of the state tournament.
Correct. Yeah. Mr. Pearson, you had your hand up briefly.
Yeah, I just wanted to reiterate too. So leading up down the road to basketball, we better, I don't know, I like consistency, so we better be similar down the road. Because basketball's already, for the 3A wise, it's already stated the the same thing. So I just want to reiterate that down the road we should probably be the same.
We're getting there, I hope. Anybody else?
Yeah, Paul
Mr.
Sullivan,
Sullivan.
Friendly High. Just for clarification, so that that motion keeps the 3A
2-2
current, correct?
Correct. 2-2. Okay. Yeah, let's try it this way. All in favor of the motion, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Aye.
Any opposed, please unmute and indicate by saying nay. Okay, we're through the fall. Real quick, before we get into winter, does anybody need a 5-minute break to go run to the bathroom or check on anything? Or do you want to just keep plugging along?
If you don't need me, Bart, I'm going to step away, take care of a phone call.
I always need you, but go ahead. Okay, since nobody needs a break, let's go boys basketball. 5A, we've actually had surveys sent out. One of the coaches took it upon himself. They actually wanted all 9 teams to get into the tournament, which kind of surprised me a little bit, but they want it. Who am I to say? 4A, we had proposed 3-1 when the tournament was south, 2-2 when it's north. 3A, we had proposed 3-1 when it's north and 2-2 when it's south. 2A would stay the same as it is, and based on what we just dealt with the 1A, I would assume they want to keep status quo and go top 2 teams into an 8-team tournament. Thoughts here? Okay, if we don't have any discussion on this, we would entertain a motion on whatever somebody would like to do here.
Actually, so looking at it, Tony, 485A South, I mean, that's probably where Wade was mentioning, like this may be one of those places where we need to be consistent. And again, from being the 3rd place team from the South that played in these semifinals of the state tournament, that was not a competitive basketball game. So I'm not so sure that the the ones and twos from the north and south wouldn't have been a better state tournament than what it was. Just my 2 cents.
Mr. Odegaard.
Yeah, I agree with the consistency of what we just did with volleyball. I also support what Tony said, that I'm not sure that a third place team out of region deserves a spot in state championship tournament. I mean, there's 2 teams from their region ahead of them already. I think they've been beat out. So that's my 2 cents.
Mr. Sullivan, did you have anything you want to add on this? No? Okay. Anybody else? Comments, questions, thoughts, concerns? Mr. Anthiam?
I just gonna reiterate, I agree. I think it should go 2-2, 4A, 2-2, 3A. Stay consistent, and we're good.
Mr. Art Anderson?
Again, I think that's a great compromise. I know there's way more teams again in the South in the 4A than there are in the 5A. And so I know that our very top teams are very competitive, and we have very close. We've had a couple really close region championship games. I can't argue 2-2, but I can see if it was not 2-2.
Mr. Baldwin?
So just throw this out there for the 1A. My coaches that submitted public comment, and I don't know if this alignment or next alignment, or if we ever get to this point with an RPI Harbin kind of system for ranking at the 1A, and somebody could look at those numbers. We know who that somebody is there, but just throwing that out there. Yeah.
Thank you, Mr. Baldwin. I'm trying to figure out how every time somebody gets brought up, it's the same person. Mr. Larson?
For the record, I would love to see a 4-4 state tournament
At the Dallas Larson Arena.
In Tonopah. Right in the middle.
Any other comments, questions, discussion? If not, we'd be looking for a motion to create this into something we're actually going to use. Mr. Art Anderson?
Again, I apologize. One last comment.
You're good.
If it does go 2-2 for 4A basketball, and it just went 2-2 for 4A tennis, is there an opportunity to revisit 4A soccer? And does that sound completely greedy, I guess, so that I don't get grief from soccer coaches up north?
You think you'd get grief from soccer coaches? Do they ever give you grief? That's up to this committee if you want to go back and revisit that. We haven't sent it to the board. So that's up to everyone here.
Tony Polsing, 4A5A South, to Art's point. Is this third place person going to state a relatively new thing? I don't, and I would be curious what the success rate of a 3 seed upsetting a 1 would be. And it just, again, for 4A girls basketball's sake, Tammy can speak to this. Like, she just replayed her semifinal game the following week. I mean, we played the same opponent again. That's why I like the 2-2. And then, the one from here plays the 2 up north, and vice versa. I think it makes it a cleaner tournament. But again, I would just be curious what, the success rate of a 3 seed actually going in and upsetting a 1 from the north or wherever it has been, in the past.
I'm going to channel my inner David Wilson on this one and say there are a whole lot of people in this room who are a lot smarter than I am. There are also a whole lot of people in this room who've been here longer than I have. But I can tell you that I've been through tournament formats where we had a 6-team format that was 2-2-2. I've been through 3A formats where they did have the 3-1 when our 3A in the South was pretty small. Obviously, many of you were around for the 8-team formats and what some of those looked like. Mr. Anthiam.
Just talking about basketball specifically, I know when we're looking at 4A for the boys, I mean, Sierra Vista, I mean, they're moving up. Sorry. they're moving up and to the 5A, and they've always played a northern team in the championship. So North has shown competitiveness there. And then I'll say on the girls' side, a little bit fluky, but last year, year prior, we saw the North handily taking care of our 4A girls teams from the South. And this year, we saw a great competitive matchup with Legacy playing against Reno. So I think you can kind of go and see that, there is some possibility of a good matchup with the 2-2 format.
Any other comments, questions? Y'all pretty know how I feel. I'm not in favor of losing teams advancing. I never have been, but that's me, and my opinion doesn't matter. But anybody else here from our committee? Okay, so on boys basketball, why don't we do this? Let's first get through boys basketball and how we want to handle this potential playoff format. And then if the committee so chooses, if Mr. Anderson wants to go back and revisit soccer, we could do that. Mr. Larson, your hand's up.
Okay, I'm gonna try to make a motion here.
You're good at this, so I'm hoping you can come through.
I'm gonna propose it in the 5A, all 9 teams in the Southern League into tournament. In the 4A, the top 2 teams from the South, the top 2 teams from the North. In the 3A, the top 2 teams from the North, top 2 teams from the South. In the 2A, top 2 teams from each half of the state into the crossover semifinals. And in the 1A, as top 2 teams from each of 4 leagues into the 8-team tournament.
Thank you, Mr. Larson. Motion on the table. Do we have a second?
Art Anderson, 4A, 5A North. I make a second.
Motion for Mr. Larson, a second from Mr. Art Anderson. 9-team, all Southern League, everybody into the state tournament. 4A would be 2-2, 3A 2-2, 2A 2-2, 1A would be 2-2, 2-2. Any further discussion, comments, questions? All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed? Thank you. Mr. Paul Anderson, if we wanted to go back on boys soccer, what would be, or boys or girls soccer, either one here, what would be the procedure we'd need to go through?
Do we know who made the motions to approve whatever the present format is or whatever with respect to those?
Off the top of my head, I don't.
Yeah, I'm just wondering, because typically it would be whoever made the motion and the second, would.
Cottrell and Brooks.
Who?
Cottrell
Yes.
and Brooks.
Mr. Cottrell and Mr. Brooks did, because they did boys and girls soccer together. Yes.
Okay. So they could make a motion to reconsider their prior motion. If Mr. Cottrell would make that motion and Mr. Brooks would second, you could vote on that and then go back to reconsider soccer and move on from there with another motion or proposal.
And it would only be girls soccer in this case, I believe, because we are 2-2 in the 5A and the 3A for boys soccer. Girls soccer, we would have that switch in the 4A, but the motion was for boys and girls together. So Mr. Cottrell, we'll go to you first. Is there any appetite from you to revise your motion?
I will make a motion to revise my motion to relook at girls soccer. Is that correct?
Yeah, revise, send it. Yeah.
Okay.
Mr. Brooks, do you agree with that as a second?
Yeah, I will second Mr. Cottrell's revision.
Okay. Mr. Art Anderson, you wanted to open this up, and I think the only spot we're looking at here on girls soccer is that 4A, but we go to 2-2 there. Is that correct?
I believe that's correct. And I would like to make a proposal that we accept girls soccer. If you don't mind raising that screen real quick, Bart. Thank you. Girls soccer to again be the in the 5A be the top 6 teams from the South. The 4A would be the top 2 teams from the North, and the top 2 teams from the South. 3A would be top 2 teams from the North, top 2 teams from the South in a crossover semifinal. And I believe that would be what the 4A would be as well, crossover semifinal.
Correct.
And the 2A would be top 2 teams into the semifinals.
Top 4 teams and so.
I'm sorry, top 4 teams.
Yeah.
Sorry.
And then boys soccer would stay as it was before.
Boys soccer would not have any changes.
Okay.
To the proposal.
Okay. We've got Mr. Art Anderson's motion. Do we have a second to Mr. Art Anderson's motion?
Dallas Larson, 3A South, I'll second.
Motion on the table, Mr. Art Anderson, second, Mr. Larson, to change that girls soccer format to be 2 and 2 across the board. Everything else for our boys and girls soccer would be as was previously approved and as sits on page 27 and 28 of the packet. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please unmute and indicate by saying nay. Onward we go, girls basketball. Page 33. Again, all 9 teams in the South into the 5A tournament. If what we're hearing here, for what we've done so far, 4A and 3A, I'm guessing the group would like to stay 2 and 2 on those. I don't want to put words in your mouth. 2A, we go 2 and 2. 1A, we'd go back to 2-2-2-2 for East, West, Central, and South.
You want me to
Comment?
keep going with this, Bart?
You're on fire. Go ahead.
Okay, I'm gonna make the motion for the 5A to be all 9 teams in the Southern League into tournament, sorry. The 4A be the top 2 teams from the South, top 2 teams from the North. The 3A, the top 2 teams from the North, top 2 teams from the South. The 2A, top 2 teams from the North, top 2 teams from the South. And the 1A, top 2 teams from each of 4 leagues into their 8-team tournament.
Motion on the table from Mr. Larson. Do we have a second?
Tony Polzing, 4A5A South, I second.
Motion, Mr. Larson, second by Mr. Polzing, and I'm sure you don't need me to repeat it. Any further questions, comments, discussion? All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please unmute, indicate by saying nay. Page 34, bowling. In a discussion with our bowling coordinator, Brian Gregorich, regarding this one. I'm sure this will really interest our people in the North. Currently what we have, our 5A, we have the top 8 teams going to the state team tournament, top 30 individuals based on the regular season average into a tournament. 4A, top 6 from each league for a 12-team tournament. Top 20 individuals based on the regular season average. And then the 3A, which will not exist in bowling for the next cycle, as we folded it into the 4A, had the top 4 from each league and 20 individuals. Mr. Gregorich, after looking at some of the scores that got in and competed in the individual tournament, suggested instead that we have a qualifying standard for bowling. And this would then envelop maybe more than the top 30 individuals in the 5A if they can meet the 5A qualifying average. Maybe more, maybe fewer in the 4A if they could meet the qualifying average. Team-wise, what we would propose is staying with 8 in the 5A, and we would also have a qualifying standard for a team average that Mr. Gregorich proposed, and have a maximum of 16 teams in both boys and girls into the field there. That's a lot of information. Questions, comments, thoughts? Just so you know, there are 8 teams in the 5A in bowling, so it would be all in. We currently have, as I'm looking at my chart, 35 boys, 34 girls teams in the 4A.
Bart, do we have any idea? I assume you've done some homework. How many would have qualified based on these standards?
Yeah, the 5A would have been real close to that 30. Now, again, as we look at shrinking the 5A to just 8 teams this time around, keeping in mind that everybody has a team of 4 bowlers out there at a given time, I don't know that you're going to get all the way to that 30, but you're going to be close. 4A, 3A wise, it would have taken a few kids out. Not a lot, would have probably taken that 20 down to 15. there are, and I don't know, Mr. Polzing, if you've been out or if anybody else has been out and saw some of the bowling. We had two 4A kids in the tournaments this year roll 300 games in the 4A. And it was exciting. It really was. So we've got some good bowlers throughout. We may not have the depth is the issue.
Yeah, I was just curious, as you know, as a lot of the discussions been on including kids, you know, I was just curious how many this would exclude based on, I'm all for qualifying standards. I was just curious if we knew the number that would affect. Thank you.
And I think too, in the 4A, when you look at the 4A girls with that 120 being the number, I really imagine when you fold that 4A into the 3A, instead of taking the top 20 individuals, we're probably looking at 25 to 30 there. Again, depends on the kids on a given year and the lane conditions and everything else. Mr. Polsey, do you have a visitor? Other comments, questions, thoughts here? Otherwise, we'd be entertaining a motion.
Tony Polzing, 485A South. I'd like to make a motion that we approve the bowling postseason as presented, including the qualifying standards.
Thank you, Mr. Polzing. Do we have a second?
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will second that motion by CAA. Tony Polzing.
It's like he's paying you every time you say that. Motion by Mr. Polzing, second by Mr. Larson to approve the bowling postseason format as presented. Any questions, comments, or thoughts on this? Okay, all in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed indicate by
Aye.
sorry. I'm sorry for jumping on you. Any opposed, please unmute and indicate by saying nay. Thank you. Flag football, page number 35, team sport here only. You see what we've done these past couple of years. Thank you again. Big thank you to the Las Vegas Raiders for allowing us into Allegiant for the championship games. Our current alignment that we are presenting to the Board of Control in April would have 10 teams in the 5A, 36 in the 4A. We'd be looking at 8 teams out of those 10 in the 5A to the quarterfinals, depending on what we have for number of leagues. And Mr. Anthem, I think we were talking about 6 leagues here, if I remember correctly.
Yeah, that's still to be determined. We've got 36 teams. That's either going to go 4, 5, or 6. We still have some work to do on that one.
Yeah, so we had a maximum 18 team field, figuring if we went to 6, top 3 in each league. So questions, comments, thoughts here? Otherwise, we'd be entertaining a motion.
Tony Polzing, 485A South. Just to reiterate, that was very cool playing at Allegiant Stadium. Thank you guys for making that happen. It's even cooler when you win. But I would like to make a motion that we approve flag football as presented and proposed here by NIAA staff.
Thank you, Mr. Polzing. Do we have a second?
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will second the Honorable CAA, Tony Polzing's motion.
Any further questions, comments, or thoughts? That's a good thing I've got this share screen up. Ms. Habig, you had your hand up.
I was just going to ask, how many teams are in 5A
10,
and 4A?
36.
Okay.
Mr. Polzing, I do the comment that you made, thank you, but also please, if you're directing any kudos, please direct them to the Las Vegas Raiders and especially to Miles Hayes and the youth football development staff.
I'll call Mark this afternoon and let him know. I appreciate it.
He was there for the first game. He was. Okay. Any other discussion? Okay. All in favor of the motion by Mr. Polzing and the second by Mr. Larson as proposed on page 35, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, please unmute and indicate by saying nay. Skiing. I'll be shocked if Mr. Polzing and Mr. Larson tag team this one. Page 36, there's our current format with the Northern Nevada and Tahoe Basin leagues. Northern Nevada, we are looking at 14 teams. The Tahoe Basin, if all have their teams this year, it would be 8. We're just rolling with what we had last year. I don't see the need to make any changes for the sake of making changes.
Tony
So-
Polsky, 4A, 5A South, I'd like to make a motion that we approve the NIAA alignment for skiing, and I would like someone high school skiing t-shirt to sport in Southern Nevada as well.
Dallas Larson, 3A South. I will second the Honorable CAA Tony Polzin's motion.
Now you're doing it just to spite me. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? Okay, motion on the table by Mr. Polzian, who wants to start coaching skiing in the South, and a second by Mr. Larson to approve not making any changes to the postseason formats for skiing. All in favor, please indicate. I'm sorry. Do we have any further discussion or comments? Okay. All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please unmute and indicate by saying nay. Okay. I think this is where Bart's winning streak comes to an end. We go to wrestling. And we've had some comments here. You see what we currently have. We have the 12-person brackets in 5A and 4A. The public comments that we received regarding girls wrestling, please keep in mind, girls wrestling is not yet a sanctioned sport on its own. It is a division that we hold along with our 5A, 4A, 3A, 2A state tournaments. So as we get too far down the rabbit hole in this one, and Mr. Jackson, if you're still available on this, I don't know how far we can really go with girls wrestling with it not being a sanctioned sport yet.
Correct. And we're staying per the plan that's been presented to the board. We've stayed with the open division until we get to the point where it's going to be fully sanctioned. And then we will look at it from that standpoint. But in conversation with other individuals, as well as some people from the South and some from the North, I don't think we're at the point right now where this committee needs to do anything or can do anything because it's not sanctioned. So we need to stay status quo with that. And hopefully we can get the sanctioning done. I think we're ready. I just think the board will hear from us about the postseason and the success we had. I will tell you that the state wrestling tournament was the largest ticketed state championship for wrestling in the history of the NIAA. And I attribute that to one factor and one factor only, aside from the great venue, the great wrestling, and the great teams. The girls draw. They draw. It was a good tournament, and they're a draw, and we're ready to go. So we need to get there, but until we do, we don't do anything yet with wrestling. They're not sanctioned. Girls wrestling, excuse me.
Thank you. Last line on here, when we talk about no replacements from opposite half of the state, no replacements afternoon on Monday. Again, this has come up from a board of control member. Part of this discussion regarding travel plans made by districts, and I get that's an adult problem as well. We've had some scrambling the past 2 years where we're being notified of a kid being out of the tournament on a Wednesday, and the bus is leaving in a few hours, or the bus is leaving on Thursday morning, and trying to get that replacement has been difficult. And we've got a couple, well, at least one on the board, and I'm not sure I completely disagree with this either, who would like to set a hard and fast deadline. And that kid can still drop out, obviously, but a couple of times had to go to a kid who hadn't practiced in a couple of days and say, are you good competing in the state tournament? Because we've got a spot that just opened up. We did have somebody actually refuse because of that this year, which seemed a little bit odd, but it did happen. Mr. Art Anderson, your hand's up.
I would just like Art Anderson, 5A, 4A North, I'd like to make a comment that it's been brought to my attention that the wrestling coaches haven't had an opportunity to look at this fully and come up with a possible alternative to the way that it's set up for 4 different state championships. And is there a way that when we look at this proposal that we go necessarily region by classification, and could we possibly postpone some of the classifications to see if something comes up before, during our next meeting. I don't know if any of that made sense. It just seems like a surprise that the 4A and the 5A are being cut wrestlers. And is there an option that we could maybe combine, as I brought forward in the past, combining both the 5A and the 4A? But I would like to do that with more coaching input.
Our committee won't meet again until May. Whether or not that will affect the board or affect anything that we do or planning purposes wise, that's not for me to determine. Again, the committee can do pretty much what it wants. I'm not going to take that out of its hands. Let me hear from Mr. Pearson first, then Mr. Larson, and then I want to get Mr. Jackson's input. Mr. Pearson.
Yes, I've been around the wrestling scene a few years, and I'm gonna start off with the 5A, 4A. I don't understand why we reduce that. To me, that seems very silly. Honestly, when you run a wrestling tournament, we could easily put in a 16-man bracket for the 5A, and it'd be same timing. It doesn't add time to the whole weekend. Does not at all. It'd even make it better. I mean, you're going 12, you might as well go 16. It makes no sense to me if you're going to do that on a bracket side of things. Obviously, you're going to have more kids there, but it's going to be kids with teams that already are there. So it's not a big deal. And that's why I was never understood the 12-man bracket. But that's on the 5A, and then the 4A, obviously, they're at their own little site. So I don't understand why they reduced those numbers, and I'm sure that's where Art's having concerns too, I believe. And then on the side of the 3A, this is where I'm getting at with our representation, which we've done over the years that I coached. There was times where we had 5 in the north, 3 in the south, and then vice versa. We had only 3 in the north qualify and 5 in the south based off of our representation of teams. And we would like to strive for that on the in the 3A area also, because our 5th place guys are fully capable of competing and wrestling right along with the 3rd place guy from the south. And you never know at a bracket. We had a great example. Wrestling's one of those sports where, I mean, yeah, you say, oh, a 1-3 matchup doesn't happen. Well, in wrestling, there are upsets. We had our kid was 4th at regionals and shouldn't even got to the 3rd place match in regionals and ended up in state finals. So wrestling's a whole different sport, and we can't look at it as like we did with the sports of 2-2 team wise. And I know being around it, I know that, and that's my concerns. And we want to keep promoting the sport and do what's best. And more qualifiers, not going to be a problem with timing of the tournament. I'm going to be honest with you on that.
Thank you, Mr. Pearson, Mr. Larson, then Mr. Anthium, then Mr. Jackson.
Yeah, I looking at the number of schools in wrestling, I knew this would be one that would be different from the other team sports we talked about. The only thing that as I've talked with different northern and coaches, was the option of that pigtail. I think it used to happen all the time in the 4A. I believe it's our 4th place wrestler would get to have that match with the 5th place northern wrestler to decide who got to make it into the bracket. That would be the one consideration we would like to ask for in this situation in the 3A.
Mr. Anthium.
My comment was more so specific to that last sentence that's on there. I know we're talking wrestling right now about replacements. Where are we at with that statement with cross country, track, swim, bowling, tennis?
I was getting the flavor of the committee on this one because this is where it happens most often, is in wrestling. And I wanted to see what the committee thought, because it's going to go to the board in April. And I would think that if it goes for one, it goes for all. That's kind of the way we're looking at it. I know it forces some kids, some parents to really scramble when it's on the opposite half of the state. When you look at wrestling, more so than tennis, for instance, if you have a replacement, let's say the South has only 3 kids in 2A at 285, and we add another North kid, does that have an impact on the team scoring and who actually wins? when that fifth place kid didn't really qualify to begin with? I don't know. That's why I'm leaving it out here for this group to discuss. But Mr. Anthony, I do anticipate with the board discussion on that. Yes, we'd be talking about pretty much any individual sport.
Thank you.
Mr. Jackson, I don't know if you want to be the Debbie Downer on this one, if you want to leave that for me, but I'll let you go first.
I don't know, Bart. I don't know if I'm going to be the Debbie Downer or if I'm going to go completely against you. I would not be opposed. Bart and I have had conversations about the size of the state wrestling tournament. There are some things in play in the back end of the state wrestling tournament. It has nothing to do with the competition. It has nothing to do with the kids or the representation. It has to do with other aspects, adult aspects. With that being said, if you table this one, Bart, I know that's probably not a term you wanted to hear right now, and we move it into the May postseason format, am I going to be terribly upset by that? No. That may give me time to flesh out some of the information I need to for that other aspect. If you don't table it and you move forward, I still do the same thing. I don't know the answer to this right now. With the addition, like the comment was, what would happen if we went from a 12 to a 16? Those are the type of logistic questions I need to have answered for the issues I'm addressing on the backside of this. With that being said, I don't want to go down a path too far, but I know what I'm facing as the executive director with that decision that's coming forward and what we may be looking at. And I want to make sure we make the best decision that we can do, and we continue to offer the best tournament possible. So that's a lot of cloak and dagger nonsense, but Bart knows where I'm at with this. But I think folks in this room could probably read the room a little bit and figure out what I'm trying to say.
Yeah, that's a whole lot of cryptic. I will agree. I'll make my comment here, and kind of it relates to Mr. Pearson's comment, even though we may be seeing it from different angles. If you go to 12, what's stopping you from going to 16? If you go to 16, what's stopping you from going to 24? At some point, the line needs to be drawn somewhere. And when you look at even a fourth place kid, that fourth place kid has lost twice in the region meet. Not to say he can't go win the state meet, right? But as we look at a fifth or sixth place kid, again, if you want the state to the region tournament to mean something for qualifying, where is that line? What tells you where it is? And that's, I looked at it, keeping it consistent between the 5, 4, 3, 2 and the girls and top 4 on each side. If that's not something this committee agrees with, it will not be the first of my recommendations that has been changed today. I will not die of a broken heart as a result of it. Mr. Pearson, I don't know if your hand's still up or if this is new from you, but let me go to you first.
Yeah, I just want to clarify with the pigtail match that Dallas talked about. Technically, there are two types of pigtails. One, you're there in the tournament out, and we didn't follow that when the 5A did that and passed. And I think we would keep it in somehow with the consolation, or we can go either way. There's two routes on that pigtail match. You're either in the tournament, it gets you in, or you continue with the consolation. And I know in the past years when they actually did that 9-man bracket for the 5A, 4A, it was all one league before. They were actually still in the tournament. So I just wanted to clarify there's two routes we could take on that path with the pigtail. But I'm a firm believer that more is not going to do much damage to the sport.
Mr. Posey and then Mr. Art Anderson.
Yeah, I would say, honestly, this particular proposal blew up my phone probably more than football when it came out. I know the coaches that I've talked to down here would much prefer to keep it the way it is currently rather than removing people. Well, my 2 cents, super state, man, one classification, 142 is 142, go get it. But that's just my personal 2 cents. But I can tell you that in the South, the coaches do not want to reduce the number or the amount of students who qualify for state wrestling. For instance, we had some of our kids who were, beat some of the 4A state champions, and they didn't qualify, or that, they were, or fourth place in our region or whatever. But I mean, just something to consider. because we've been consistently pretty much keeping everything the same. And maybe like Tim said, maybe we table this, try to get a little bit more clarifying information and talk about it again in May when Tim has answers to his riddle of the Sphinx or whatever it is he's going through.
Yeah, I don't even think you want to know, to be honest. Mr. Art Anderson.
Just real quick, and I appreciate everybody's comments because I think we're headed in the same path. I just think getting more coaching input and more from some of the more knowledgeable wrestling people in the state. Although Coach First Pearson is one of the most knowledgeable, but I don't think it's going to hurt wrestling, not us tabling it at all, because we don't even know necessarily when we're going to have the state tournament. That changes on even when we begin the season, when the state tournament finally comes, could possibly change. So if we table this for more input in May and then it gets approved in June, or whenever the summer board meeting is, that I don't see a problem with that at all. And when it comes to it, I'll make a proposal to just table wrestling until May.
Thank you, Mr. Anderson. Ms. Habig.
That's actually what I was going to ask is, do someone need to make a motion to table it? Because I'm willing to do it.
Yeah, if somebody wants to table it, a motion would need to be made to table it, bring it back in May.
Okay, I'll make the motion that we table wrestling for now, and get more input and bring it back on the next realignment committee meeting.
Motion from Ms. Habig to table. Do we have a second?
Art Anderson, second.
Okay. Motion on the table from Ms. Habig, second by Mr. Art Anderson to table wrestling until we get more information and come back in May with it. Any further questions, comments, or discussion? All in favor, please unmute and indicate by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, please indicate by unmuting and saying nay. Thank you. I'm going to hold off on the rest of that discussion then too, until we figure out exactly what it is we're going to do. And then we can take that forward to the board. That concludes tournament formats. Let's move to item number 10 on the agenda, which is the review of the spring meeting dates for discussion only. We've had these up before, just reminding you. May 21 by Zoom, spring sport placement meetings. May 28th by Zoom, spring sports appeals meetings. That's it. That's all that's left for this committee, those two meetings. Unless somebody throws a roadblock someplace else. Item number 11 should actually read any comments for the good of the order from any of our committee members. We would open that up. Anybody have anything to add for us today?
Dallas Larson 3A South. I just want to reiterate, Tony Polzing, CAA.
I really hope you're getting some sort of commission out of that. Mr. Anthium.
Yeah, besides Dallas being a CMAA and he's also leading the state in various aspects. Congratulations, Dallas, publicly. I do Bart, specific to wrestling. Again, I know I'm making kind of a point on that last sentence, no replacements from opposite half state afternoon on Monday. I know that we're looking at wrestling specifically to be tabled. But we also are talking, tennis and cross country today, and bowling, and just want to see how we can impact that, or do we have to wait till wrestling?
I don't think we've got enough of a feel yet for wrestling on this, and we're on an item now that's discussion only. We can still have that discussion with the board in April, and I think no matter what this committee decides, there's certain people on the board that are going to want to have that conversation in April regardless. So we will we'll do our best on that one. Let's put it that way. Mr. Jackson, anything you want to add on that?
Nope, I think you nailed it.
For once. Anybody else? Item number 12 is public comment. This time provides an opportunity for citizens to address the committee about any matter not listed on the agenda. Items raised during this portion of the agenda cannot be deliberated or acted upon until notice procedures of the open meeting law have been met. Should a member of the public wish to speak on a matter not listed on the agenda, it is asked that said person Complete a public comment card and submit it to an NIAA staff member prior to the opening of this item. A limit of 3 minutes per person and or 5 minutes for the spokesperson of a group may be imposed. It is requested that comments be directed to the committee as a whole. Comments that are deemed to be irrelevant, repetitious, offensive, inflammatory, willfully disruptive, or deemed to be personal attacks will not be permitted. Ms. Wonder, Mr. Jackson, in our office in Reno Sparks, do we have any live public comment?
No.
Anybody else stationed around our various parts of Nevada have any live public comment?
I have an email.
Ms. Wonder, you have an email. Please proceed.
Okay. This is from Don Rapalai. Jim, this may concern. I've been the cross-country coach at Virgin Valley High School for the past 6 years, and I am truly shocked by the NIAA's decision to reduce the number of qualifying teams from both the North and the South for state championship. This decision doesn't make sense to me, especially given the limited number of athletes we have in our smaller rural communities. It feels like this change takes away a valuable opportunity for kids who work so hard, but may never have the chance to compete at the state level. For many of our younger, less physically mature athletes, this means they'll never get to experience a championship until they're older, by which time injuries or other factors might prevent them from reaching their full potential. I've attended the last 6 state championships, and I've seen firsthand how possible it is to have 8 teams competing. Why take this opportunity away from 2 teams that would do anything to be a part of the championship? I strongly disagree with this decision and believe we should reinstate the previous format where 4 teams from each region competed. Thank you for considering my feedback, and respectfully, I urge a vote to return to the old system. Sincerely, Don Rapalai.
Thank you, Ms. Wonder. Any other public comment? Okay. Again, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for your service to this committee, for your input, for everything that you are doing for the kids. We greatly appreciate it. We will meet again in May, and at 12:42 p.m. on this Wednesday, March the 5th, this meeting of our NIA Realignment Committee is officially adjourned. Thank you, everyone.
Bart, don't leave. Paul,
Yep.
stay. Kate's on her way.
Please allow me to stop recording and to
I'm guessing that's not Paul Sullivan. It's the other Paul.
Mr. Anderson. Yes.
Paul, you can stay, but I don't think you'd want to.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Let me get this off YouTube before anybody else